If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 156, Public Opinion and Memories. Over the next 2 days, the major anime of the current season in Japan premiered one after another. Unlike the previous season, which had featured a highly popular sequel such as Burning Sun Season 4, there was virtually no suspense this time. One Punch Man was clearly going to continue dominating the weekly viewership rankings. However, when the 4th season of Hikaru no Go premiered, its ratings also exceeded the peak data of its 3rd season, reaching 5.71% and ranking second among all newly premiered anime this season. The anime market had quietly entered a delicate phase. Shirogana's 2 works immediately claimed first and second place in viewership at the very start of the season. It was easy to foresee that, over the next 3 months, few other anime would pose any real threat to either of them. This truly was the most predictable winter anime season in history. The first week of January passed quickly. By now, whether it was admiration, disdain, jealousy, or reluctant respect within Japan's anime and manga industries, everyone was forced to confront the same question. Just how big a storm was Shirogane going to stir up in this market? It was simply too exaggerated. Media coverage related to Shirogane and One Punch Man never stopped. Of course, for REI, the popularity of One Punch Man also boosted sales of his 2 ongoing manga, Hikaru no Go and Hunter x Hunter. The average volume sales of Hikaru no Go surpassed 12 million copies. As for Hunter x Hunter, the series had been serialized for less than a year and a half, with only 3 volumes released so far. The 3rd volume, released just 2 weeks earlier, achieved first-week sales of 6.01 million copies, raising the average sales across all 3 volumes to 9.13 million. Judging by the current trend, it was highly likely that the series would exceed an average of 10 million copies per volume before the Spring Festival, setting a new record as the fastest manga in Japan's history to reach that milestone. It could only be said that, from the moment REI entered the market with the serialization of Hikaru no Go to now, barely a year and a half had passed, yet he had already become the most sought-after creator in both the manga and anime industries. In the following weeks, REI gradually shifted more of his attention to his university final exams. No matter how tolerant the animation department of Vocational University was of his commercial activities, he still had to pass his finals and earn the required credits. Failing to graduate on time would be the real headline news for anime industry. Fortunately, REI attended classes diligently, and much of his professional work involved real production processes related to manga and anime. His work itself was a form of practice and learning, so he felt little pressure regarding the exams. What did cause him some mild trouble, however, were the rumors spreading around campus about his relationship with Miyu. After Miyu's identity as the manga artist Saki was exposed, her connection with REI quickly became a topic of speculation, both online and offline. Many of REI's fans began paying close attention to Saki, imagining the relationship between the two as ambiguous. REI, having experienced similar situations back in high school, was already used to it. Miyu, on the other hand, was far more relaxed. Since rumors about her relationship with REI began circulating, the number of boys pursuing her dropped sharply. Compared to a top-tier manga artist earning hundreds of millions annually, most suitors felt naturally intimidated. After realizing this unexpected benefit, Miyu even deliberately began appearing near REI's academic building to greet him. She considered him a very effective shield and trusted that REI's personality wouldn't mind the rumors. Meanwhile, in January, Hunter x Hunter also reached its highest popularity since serialization began. The latest chapter surpassed the second-ranked Source War Chronicle by more than 1.1 million votes. In terms of performance, status, evaluation, and the group's strategic focus, Hunter x Hunter on Dream Comic had completely overtaken Source War Chronicle, which had held the number 1 position for 3 years. It became the unquestioned flagship title of the magazine. After the story entered the Heaven's Arena arc, beginning with Hisoka blocking the entrance, followed by Gon and Killua learning Nin ability and participating in arena battles, the long-laid foreshadowing finally paid off. During the Hunter exam, Hisoka had cornered Gon but spared him out of twisted admiration, even returning the number tag Gon needed to pass, an act that deeply humiliated Gon. Hisoka had mockingly stated that he would only accept that number tag back when Gon could land a solid punch on his face. In the latest chapter, after intense training at the arena tower, that promise was finally fulfilled. Gon struck Hisoka squarely in the face with all his strength, returned the number tag, and was then utterly defeated by Hisoka once the latter became serious. For many long-time readers, Hunter x Hunter had previously been seen as merely a good manga. The early story arcs were undeniably awkward. As the protagonist, Gon had barely any impressive individual battles. He often served more as a catalyst for teamwork, making crucial decisions rather than winning through sheer strength. He had been spared by Hisoka during the Hunter exam, and even his final victory there relied on Hanzo's mercy. Some readers had complained, but the strength of the supporting cast kept them invested. Since the introduction of Nen ability in the arena arc, however, Hunter x Hunter truly revealed itself as an intense, strategic battle manga. Although Gon still lost to Hisoka, the long foreshadowed confrontation ignited the passion of the fanbase. And after the Heavens Arena arc, the story was set to enter the Phantom Troop arc, which Rei personally ranked second only to the Chimera Ant arc in the original work. By late January, the third episode of One Punch Man Season 2 officially aired. Since King's appearance in the first episode, the character most discussed in the original work and the source of countless memes, his popularity skyrocketed. In just 2 weeks, he rose to second place in popularity, surpassed only by Saitama. Of course, there were criticisms of One Punch Man online as well. The most common complaint focused on the new character, Garou. Because the storyline was gradually entering the Garou and Monster Association arc, and the plot needed to start shaping Garou while he was still relatively weak, many fans began to grow impatient. Seriously, why is Shirogane giving Garou so much screen time? Is this supposed to show his growth? Won't he just get taken down by Saitama with one punch in the end? I actually find Garou pretty interesting. He's bad, but he has principles. His thinking is strange, and you feel conflicted watching him, but you don't really hate him. Don't you get it yet? This storyline uses Bang's disciple, Garou, to connect the various characters of the Hero Association. Before this, most Hero Association members were just labels like S-Class Rank X. It's impossible for teacher Saitama to personally interact with and fight all of them in depth. A villain like Garou, whose strength is below top S-Class, is perfect for highlighting the charm of other heroes. That's true. I always thought Tank Top Master was just a muscle-brained gag character. But after his fight with Garou, I actually like him a lot. He's upright, loyal, and tough. I still like King the most. A regular gaming shut-in who somehow becomes the strongest man on Earth. I really want to see what happens when he runs into a monster again. Do you seriously think King has no power? Think about it. Every time he's in danger, Saitama shows up. On the surface, he looks like a powerless ordinary guy, but in reality, he's the world's greatest summoner. His passive skill Summon Saitama activates whenever he's in trouble. Wait, that actually makes sense. What I admire most about Shirogane is how a character who barely appeared has generated so many memes. Last season, they said King's King engine activated during battle, and now we know it's just his heart pounding from fear. When Saitama got punched to the moon and kicked off a crater to return to Earth, that feat was also attributed to King, saying he used the moon as a punching bag and even tossed bombs into black holes. I lose it every time King appears. But won't this character's arc end soon? Since he knows he's powerless, it'll be hard for him to shine later. If a real big battle happens, he'll be exposed instantly. That's why you're just a viewer and Shirogane is a master. Do you really think he spent that much effort building King just to turn him into a one-off joke? I still feel Season 2 is slightly weaker than Season 1. Mainly because Garou slows the pacing and cuts into Saitama's screen time. That's inevitable. Season 1 had the novelty of first appearances. Season 2 has to build on an existing framework. To be honest, aren't all the later enemies kind of weak? Boros in Season 1 was portrayed too powerfully. Compared to him, later enemies don't give much pressure, so the excitement feels lower. The third episode already hit a 6.32% rating. Who knows how high it'll go by the end of the season. Late January arrived. After finishing a full week of exams, Rei finally welcomed his first winter break at university. Freed from academic pressure, he was able to focus entirely on his work. As a result, the quality of that week's manga manuscript improved noticeably. At Illumination Animation Production Company, Rei also had more time to personally participate in the production of One Punch Man. The second season of the anime was essentially a prelude and set up for the Monster Association arc from the original manga. It introduced the Monster Association, gave Garou room to grow, and gradually developed the S-Class heroes of the Hero Association. S-Class heroes. Naturally, Season 2 also included many famous memes from the original work. For example, Bakuzan, the disgrace of the dragon level. And storylines such as King instantly defeating the top dragon level monster, Centipede. Overall, however, the season mainly focused on groundwork and build-up. REI's primary responsibility at Illumination Animation Production Company had already shifted to participating in the review and planning process for the third season of One Punch Man. By now, more than a dozen volumes of Hikaru no Go had been released, with an average per volume sale of 12 million copies. From manga royalties alone, REI's income exceeded 200 million yen. Although Hikaru no Go merchandise sales were not explosive, they still generated tens of millions in revenue. Combined with overseas licensing fees, adaptation fees for film and animation, and profits from his earlier works, REI's total income since entering the Japanese anime industry had surpassed 300 million yen. Meanwhile, Hunter x Hunter and One Punch Man were both enjoying peak popularity. With ample funds available, REI invested far more into the second and third seasons of One Punch Man than he had in the first season. Supported by REI's capital, Illumination Animation Production Company gained the confidence to expand. The studio began hiring aggressively and moved into simultaneous production of both the second and third seasons. After all, anime production is a meticulous craft. The more time that is invested, the higher the quality of the final work. Of course, with One Punch Man being so popular now, REI, as the copyright holder, had no shortage of options when it came to merchandise partners. Representatives from major merchandise manufacturers and distribution companies across Japan were calling him almost every day to discuss potential collaborations. Even overseas, several companies reached out, hoping to cooperate on introducing the second season of One Punch Man to international markets. REI could only deal with these matters during his break. After an exhausting day of work, REI returned to his apartment. With his current wealth, buying an even better home would not have been difficult. However, he preferred lively surroundings. Most luxury residences were located in quiet districts, while he favored the energy of the bustling city center. He checked the time. It was already 1 in the morning. It feels like there's still so much to handle during the break. Right now, most of the copyright matters for One Punch Man are being handled by the agency Misaki recommended. The cost isn't high, but it's clearly not suitable for long-term cooperation. I still need to hire people and establish a dedicated company to manage the operation and copyright development of my works, REI muttered softly while soaking in the bathtub. Also, since Hikaru no Go and Hunter x Hunter are performing so well, my influence in the industry is completely different from before. I need to seriously discuss royalty and copyright sharing ratios with Hojimori Group. When REI first worked on Hikaru no Go, Hojimori Group offered him a 9% royalty rate on manga volume sales, which was standard for top-tier manga artists in Japan. But now, with Hunter x Hunter reaching this level of success, there was still room to increase the share, even if only by 1 or 2 percentage points. That small increase would translate into tens of millions in additional revenue. It was not a trivial amount. REI's current achievements could undoubtedly be described as top-tier. Among the manga artists still active in Japan, only a handful could rival him in overall influence. REI had initially thought that Hojimori Group would bring this up on their own, sparing him the awkwardness of initiating the discussion. However, Hunter x Hunter had held the #1 ranking in the magazine for several months, and the group still hadn't made a move. At this point, REI knew he had to remind them himself. Why does it feel like I'm even busier after being reborn than I was in my previous life? REI laughed quietly to himself. He stepped out of the bathtub and looked at his youthful reflection in the mirror. The appearance of his previous life was gradually becoming vague and distant. REI smiled, walked out of the bathroom, and collapsed onto the bed. As he cleared his mind, sleep quickly overtook him. Then, during the dream, a cluster of memories from his previous life surged forward, vivid and sharp, as if they had happened just yesterday. The next morning, REI woke up and blinked in confusion for a moment before fully realizing what had occurred. After nearly a year, fragments of his previous life's memories had finally resurfaced again. And naturally, within that exceptionally clear flood of memories was something that immediately caught REI's attention. An animated work. A brand new one. Something that felt less like entertainment and more like a piece of art. Chapter 157, New Work. Is it, this work? A flicker of surprise crossed REI's face. Although he still could not recall many details, he had a rough understanding of his previous life. He knew which songs had been popular, but could not remember their melodies. He knew which works had been famous and valuable, but could not recall their specific plots or details. However, he retained a clear sense of which works were true masterpieces and which were merely excellent across the entire act circle of his previous life. This time was different from before. The works he had recalled previously were all famous Asian or globally renowned Japanese creations. But this time, the memory came from the Western side. Arcane. An animated series adapted from the background lore of the famous game League of Legends in his previous life. An animated masterpiece. A work of art. After its release, it topped viewership charts in over 60 countries worldwide and was nominated for 4 Emmy Awards. Most ordinary people might not know what the Emmy Awards represent, but just as the Oscars are the pinnacle of film, the Emmys are the highest honor for television broadcast works. They are the Oscars of television. Moreover, although Arcane was adapted from a game's background story, the original game was not required to enjoy it at all. In fact, many League of Legends players in his previous life barely cared about the game's lore. They simply logged in and played. Arcane stood at an exceptionally high position in Rei's heart. In his previous life, he had gone through a long period of animation fatigue, watching many works that felt hollow and lacked immersion. He had even wondered whether it was simply because he was no longer young, whether he had lost the ability to immerse himself in animation the way he once could. But Arcane made him stay up all night, binge-watching every episode from beginning to end. Even when the second season was released years later, he was still deeply moved by its story, production quality, and unforgettable characters. And, naturally, it was also a tragedy. A genre he loved. However, if this work were to be produced with the same level of quality as in his previous life, the production cost would be staggering. Even with lower production costs in Japan, recreating or surpassing that level would require an enormous amount of funding. Even if Rei invested every cent he currently possessed, he might only barely manage it. After all, although Arcane was a serialized animation, its visual quality far exceeded 95% of animated films. It was essentially a television series produced at full cinematic quality. A true money-burning project. But, there's nothing to worry about. Rei took a deep breath and smiled. Isn't that exactly why money exists? Letting money sit idle in a bank account was boring. And high investment meant high returns. If he had recalled an inferior work, he might have shelved the idea out of laziness. But since it was Arcane, there was no way he could ignore it. Although he was currently investing heavily in One Punch Man, the funds were only temporarily tied up. Animation production cycles lasted at least half a year, often 1 to 2 years. Over that time, profits from One Punch Man and Hunter x Hunter would certainly flow in. Funding was not an issue. After organizing his thoughts, Rei got dressed and headed out for Illumination Production Company. When he arrived, the company was already bustling with activity early in the morning. Rei was on winter break as a student. They were not. Production coordinators were already on the phone, urging highly skilled but chronically deadline-dodging animators across Capital City to submit their key frames. The animation director frowned deeply as he examined drafts, adjusting color tones, lighting, and reviewing storyboards for upcoming One Punch Man episodes. The success of this project was unprecedented. For many of them, this might be the only masterpiece they would ever participate in during their careers. No one wanted even the slightest flaw to mar it. And unlike most productions, this one lacked nothing. Money was abundant. Rei alone supported hundreds of employees with his manga royalties. Everyone respected him from the bottom of their hearts. Good morning, Shirogane. Teacher Shirogane is here. Teacher Shirogane, please go check on the director. He's been staring blankly at the Season 3 Episode 4 script you gave him all morning. Didn't I already provide the general storyboards? Rei laughed. He just needs to flesh out the details based on the content. This was the advantage of adapting a manga into animation. Many scenes could be directly translated from the panels. The director only needed to apply his professional expertise to motion, color, sound, and atmosphere. After greeting the staff, Rei headed to Himura's office. As the producer, she was perpetually busy. Budget allocation, coordination with partner studios, contract negotiations, and occasional media interviews filled her schedule. Rei's original reason for coming was simple. He had planned to review production progress in his role as investor and consultant. But now that Arcane had resurfaced in his memory, he decided to bring it up. So, you've got a new idea again. Himari stared at him, mouth slightly open. Yes, Rei nodded calmly. I do. Once the copyright payments and part of the merchandise revenue from One Punch Man enter the settlement cycle, I plan to use that money to produce a new animation. Wait, Himari raised a hand. Let me process this. Teacher Shirogane, Hunter x Hunter still has a long road ahead, doesn't it? Yes. And One Punch Man still has Season 2 and Season 3 in production. A Season 4 isn't even out of the question. Correct. And now you already have a new animation project in mind. What's wrong? Rei asked calmly. It's not that I don't trust your judgment, Teacher Shirogane, Himari said after a pause. But do you really think you can handle all of this at once? Time is like water in a sponge, Rei replied with a smile. If you squeeze it, there's always more. Besides, I'll mainly be responsible for the story framework and character design. The bulk of the production work will still rely on you. He continued evenly, I'm not bringing this up today because I plan to start production tomorrow. I just wanted to inform you that I have this idea. Then his tone grew more serious. And I have great confidence in this new work. I genuinely believe it will be no worse than One Punch Man. So? Himari looked at him, puzzled. So, Rei said slowly, do you know any truly capable talents in the industry who are currently frustrated or underappreciated at other companies? If you do, go talk to them. As long as their asking price isn't outrageous, recruit them. His gaze sharpened. My requirements for this new animation are very high. Extremely high. But the production budget will be more than sufficient. If this animation succeeds. Rei looked directly at Himari, Illumination animation will become famous worldwide. It'll be a real jackpot. One Punch Man's success was already global, but a single hit could still be attributed to luck. 2. That would be undeniable achievement. If Illumination animation could pull that off, its name would be firmly established in the animation industry. Not inferior to One Punch Man? Virtually unlimited budget? Himari's eyes lit up. Strictly speaking, a woman in her 20s wouldn't normally have such deep connections in the animation industry. Her ability to hold Illumination animation together owed much to her father, a producer in the Japanese animation industry 2 decades ago. Even so, there were still many highly capable creators in the industry who had never been given a real chance. After all, when tens of millions were invested into an animation, key positions like producer or director weren't always assigned purely based on ability. I'll need to think about this carefully, Himari said at last. Of course, Rei nodded. Rei could have chosen another animation studio to produce this new project. But he would rather spend more money than gamble on the professionalism of an unfamiliar company. In his previous life, too many excellent manga and novels had been ruined by careless adaptations from so-called major studios. In animation, scale meant nothing. If the staff lacked sincerity, even a giant studio could produce trash. If they were serious, even a small studio could create a masterpiece. Time passed quickly, and January soon came to an end. One Punch Man Season 2 had already aired up to Episode 4. With the appearances of characters like Tatsumaki's sister Hellish Blizzard, Tank Top Master, Metal Bat, and Sweet Mask, and with several of them confronting Garu, Saitama's screen time also began to rise. For various reasons, Saitama disguised himself as Bang's disciple, Charenko, and entered the martial arts tournament. The plot became increasingly engaging, and the anime reached what could be considered its peak popularity since its premiere. Episode 4 achieved a staggering 6.58% rating, topping trending lists every broadcast day. Opinion Hub's score rose to 9.4. After being introduced overseas, the anime also achieved excellent ratings in many foreign countries. This was no longer just popularity within Japan. The One Punch Man phenomenon had gone global. Merchandise orders poured in not only from domestic markets but from abroad as well. Even when overseas prices were 2 or 3 times higher than domestic ones, demand still far exceeded supply. Scalpers began to appear across the market, hoarding various One Punch Man related products. And then, on the final day of January, a piece of explosive news swept through the Japanese animation industry. Shirogane, the hottest creator in Japan over the past 2 years, posted a single-colored illustration on his creator account. Without any explanation. The illustration depicted a tall girl with blue hair braided behind her head, dressed in adventurous attire. She held a firearm, her lips curled into a slightly manic smile. Behind her lay mist-shrouded ruins. Across the illustration, several English letters were deliberately splashed in graffiti-like paint. Jinx. As everyone knew, among Japan's famous manga artists, Rei was considered an extremely low-key figure. He rarely posted about commercial activities or personal life updates on his account. Anything he published was always related to his work or creative projects. At present, Rei had 5 major works active in the market. The live-action movie 5 cm per second, set to premiere in half a month on February 14. The live-action movie Tonight, scheduled to release half a year later. The final season of Hikaru no Go and One Punch Man Season 2, both currently airing this quarter. And Hunter x Hunter, whose anime adaptation would premiere in half a year, while its manga was on the verge of breaking the milestone of 10 million average volume sales. No matter what information Rei released regarding any of these works, it would not surprise his Japanese fans. It would simply be seen as routine promotion. But this picture? What did it mean? Not only was the art style completely different from the mainstream manga styles currently dominating the market, but this blue-haired woman, apparently named Jinx, was clearly not a character from any of Rei's existing works. Considering Rei's past behavior, speculation immediately exploded. Is this a new work? Could it be fragmentary setting drafts for an upcoming project? Is teacher Shirogane about to release a new work? What's going on? Can someone explain this? Holy crap, I love this art style. It's insanely cool. A girl with a gun? Is he planning to draw a sci-fi manga? It might not even be a manga. Maybe it'll be adapted straight into an anime again. Is teacher Shirogane even human? How can someone be this productive? Maybe he just drew a concept illustration on a whim and posted it for appreciation. It might have nothing to do with a new project. That's impossible. Teacher Shirogane isn't the type who posts casually, like sharing meals or daily life. Everything on his creator account is work-related. The meaning of this image is obvious: a new project is coming. That's ridiculous. He should finish One Punch Man and Hunter x Hunter first. Starting something new will just distract him. Why worry about that? What kind of new work could possibly surpass Hunter x Hunter and One Punch Man? Instead of creating average projects, he should focus all his energy on these 2 classics. Nonsense. I like One Punch Man and Hunter x Hunter too, but what I admire most is teacher Shirogane constantly challenging himself. I want to see a work that surpasses both. He has that level of talent. If his creative drive is strong right now, he should act immediately. If he waits until inspiration fades, wouldn't that be the real regret? Exactly. Hunter x Hunter updates over 40 pages a week already. What more do you want? It's just a shame we don't know the title of this suspected new work yet. Otherwise, we could start recommending it to everyone already. It's Jinx, right? I've written it down. I really hope this work is good. The commotion Rei caused on the final day of January was followed by a wave of delayed, frantic media coverage once February arrived. The entire industry began speculating wildly about the meaning behind Rei's original illustration. And then, on the first day of February, Rei himself revealed the answer. Chapter 158, Ideas. On the first day of February, Rei posted a message through his creator account. Along with it, he uploaded another image in the same style as the colored manga illustration he had released a few days earlier. The image depicted a red-haired, heroic young woman, a blue-haired, mischievous girl, and a steady-faced middle-aged man looking at the two of them with gentle, doting eyes. Behind this warm and harmonious scene, however, stood a sinister-looking man, his gaze filled with hatred. They were the core characters of Arcane's first season, Jinx, Six, Vander, and Silco. The art style was clearly different from traditional manga, yet it was also distinct from the American comic style Rei remembered from his previous life. In truth, Rei had never liked Western comic styles, he had always preferred the Japanese manga aesthetic. And yet, when he watched Arcane in his previous life, he had been genuinely impressed by its visual style. I hope everyone likes my new animation, Arcane, which is currently in preparation. This single sentence ignited the animation industry on the very first day of February. No money was spent on promotion. There was no explanation of the genre, no synopsis, no staff list, just a colored illustration and a short line of text. Yet the title Arcane immediately shot to the top of trending searches across major animation websites and forums in Japan. Is this really a new work? He's insane. Isn't Shirogane afraid of working himself to death? Teacher Shirogane, if capital is holding you hostage, just tell us fans. My boss offers me a monthly salary of 100,000 and I still wouldn't dare work this hard. What a shame his annual income is in the hundreds of millions. If earning that much money means being responsible for 3 works at the same time, I'd rather just lie flat. You make the money, but you don't even have time to spend it. Why do my eyes keep tearing up? Because I've finally seen a true workaholic in the animation industry. In martial arts, speed is king. In any industry, speed is the ultimate secret. And teacher Shirogane isn't just fast, his quality is ridiculous. I've been watching anime for 30 years and I've never seen a monster like this. An 18-year-old earning hundreds of millions a year and still working like this. My 20-year-old son only contacts me on the 1st of every month to ask for living expenses. The gap is terrifying. Arcane? What kind of work is this? Judging by the costumes, it looks like medieval Western steampunk. Isn't that obvious? It's an alternate world fantasy. That's my favorite genre. But can teacher Shirogane really handle this kind of setting? Classic. These comments show up every single time Shirogane releases something new. He's already jumped from romance to sports, then to shonen action, and One Punch Man practically created the invincible protagonist genre. Has anything he made ever been bad? Just trust him, Shirogane always delivers. I usually love trolling people online, but I genuinely can't troll Shirogane. His works aren't perfect, Gon can be hard to understand in Hunter, and the Garu arc in One Punch Man gives Garu more screen time than Saitama, but his attitude toward creation is flawless. He never drags the plot just because a work is popular. And most importantly, he never stops innovating. No more words needed. Just for teacher Shirogane's attitude alone, I'll support anything he makes. In less than a day, news of Shirogane, his new work, and Arcane spread throughout the entire nation anime fan community. That very evening, major media outlets began frantically reporting on Uriai's new project. Even though no one knew the actual content of the work yet, public opinion across the market was overwhelmingly positive toward Arcane, a project that, at this point, had nothing but a name and 2 illustrations. If they couldn't praise the story, they praised the character designs. If they couldn't analyze the plot, they praised the art style. After all, Rei was now a top-tier figure in the animation industry, and the media knew exactly how to attract anime fans. Of course, the people who were truly shocked were not Rei's fans, but the executives of the Hojimori Group and other competing manga companies. Had Rei tasted success with One Punch Man and become emboldened? In the past, he had always been cautious with new projects, preferring to serialize them as manga first. But now, with a brand new work, he hadn't even bothered submitting it to Hojimori Group's serialization meeting. He had gone straight into producing it as an animation on his own. And judging by his current status and influence, he truly had the qualifications to do so. Although creating a work as a manga and then publishing it in collected volumes could yield astronomical royalties, and the manga company would fully handle copyright operations, the manga artists themselves wouldn't have to worry about much. They would only need to periodically cooperate with the publisher on promotional activities. However, this approach meant sharing copyright with the manga company, and the artist's actual income would inevitably be much lower. Moreover, for most manga, the ultimate destination is still animation or game and film adaptations. But now, Rei was producing his new work directly as an animation, essentially skipping several steps in the traditional process. From an outsider's perspective, Rei's approach looked extremely smart. With his current popularity in Japan, even without relying on manga magazines for promotion, fans would naturally flock to any new work he released. As long as the quality was good enough, the project would eventually grow into a massive hit. One Punch Man was the perfect example. However, this was very bad news for the Hojimori Group. Rei was a manga artist cultivated by Hojimori Group. One Punch Man was an exception, a work they themselves had rejected, so they had no grounds to blame him. After all, if you refuse to serialize someone's work, you can't forbid them from producing it independently as an animation. That kind of logic simply doesn't exist. So even though Hojimori Group's executives were practically drooling over the enormous success of One Punch Man, there was nothing they could do about it. But now, Rei had another new work, and once again, he showed no intention of submitting it to Hojimori Group. This time, many of the group's executives were genuinely dissatisfied. On the morning of the second day of the month, several executives convened an editorial department meeting, summoning Misaki and editor-in-chief Han for questioning. On the surface, they accused the two of incompetence, claiming they failed to understand Shirogana's daily life and work well enough, which supposedly caused the group to remain completely unaware of his new creative plans. Using this excuse, they openly criticized both of them. Then, the meeting finally moved to its real purpose. Misaki, for the next few days, temporarily set aside your work on Saki's work, one executive said. The group will assign someone else to handle manuscript supervision for that series. You should focus on talking to Shirogane during this period. Do your best to persuade Shirogane to serialize his new work, Arcane, on Hojimori comic in manga form. Me? Misaki sneered as soon as she left the conference room. They want me to talk to REI. What are those executives even thinking? I'm just REI's collaborating editor. How am I supposed to interfere with his future career plans? The executives are still stuck in the thinking of the previous era, Han said with a sigh, shaking his head. There's nothing we can do. You'll just have to make the trip over the next few days. Chapter 159, Results. In fact, in Han's view, the Hojimori group itself didn't have any fundamental problems. The real issue lay with the handful of high-level executives who controlled the company's shares. These men, mostly in their 60s and 70s, were deeply arrogant, and their attitudes toward the manga artists under the group had remained unchanged for decades. In Japan, there are no creators who remain at the peak forever. But new peak creators will always emerge, one after another, leading the next era. Yet these executives treated contracted manga artists as disposable resources, use them while they are valuable, then discard them once their usefulness runs out. And that assessment wasn't entirely wrong. It was extremely rare for a manga artist in Japan to remain popular for more than 10 years. Most successful artists peaked after one or two major works and gradually faded out of the industry. Otherwise, REI's proposal to serialize 2 mangas simultaneously would never have been rejected back then. At its core, those executives believed that REI would become ordinary after Hikaru no Go, just like so many others before him. Naturally, they saw no reason to grant him any special privileges. But now, you let REI carve his own path through original animation, and then you still expect him to obediently bring his new work back to the manga group for serialization? The difficulty of that was obvious. In Han's view, REI wouldn't necessarily cut off cooperation with the Hojimori group after Hunter x Hunter ended. However, times had changed. Now that REI had proven he could succeed independently in the animation market, any future cooperation would inevitably come with conditions. If he ever needed the group's support again, he would certainly demand a much larger share in revenue splits, profits, and copyrights. It would be naive for the executives to expect to continue cooperating with REI under the same old contract terms. This is work, after all. Of course, I'll go see REI and convey the executive's intentions to him, Misaki said calmly. I understand, Han replied with a faint smile. Just report REI's response truthfully. Everyone acts according to their own interests. Whatever choice REI makes, I can accept it. As for those executives, Han paused. They'll have to accept it as well. Leave the rest to me. Misaki glanced at Han, nodded, and said nothing more. No wonder her mother, such a willful person, always softened her tone when speaking of him. Han was clearly taking the troublesome part upon himself. Misaki only needed to go through the formalities with REI. The next day, when Misaki proposed serializing Arcane as a manga under the Hojimori group, REI rejected it within 2 seconds. Of course, he wasn't considering revenue alone. Cooperating with the Hojimori group meant sharing profits, but their global distribution channels could potentially propel the work to international success. From a purely financial perspective, it wouldn't necessarily be a loss. The real problem was that Arcane was not a work designed for manga form. It was a highly mature animated script, one that relied on the synergy of visuals, music, pacing, and voice acting to deliver its full emotional impact. Translating it into manga would inevitably dilute that experience. I understand, Misaki said softly. I'll convey your decision to the executives. REI froze for a moment. He hadn't expected her to back down so easily. What are you surprised about? Misaki smiled. If I were in your position, I'd make the same choice. I never thought you were foolish, and I wasn't trying to trick you. Your answer is completely reasonable. She looked at him quietly. Do well, Rei. Make this work even more successful than One Punch Man. Then her expression turned serious. No matter what big moves you make in the animation industry, remember this, you stepped onto the stage animation world as a manga artist. Never forget that. And never treat Hunter x Hunter lightly. It must remain your most important work. Don't let it become a regret. Maintain the seriousness it deserves. Naturally, Rei replied. At the current stage, Hunter x Hunter's popularity is slightly lower than One Punch Man's, simply because it hasn't been animated yet. But I guarantee that in the future, its historical status, in the hearts of fans and within the animation industry, will surpass One Punch Man. In Rei's previous life, One Punch Man surpassed Hunter x Hunter in pure commercial value. But in terms of reputation and significance within the manga industry, Hunter x Hunter stood on an entirely different level. Rei believed that wouldn't change, even in this Japan. The two works belonged to different eras. Many highly profitable internet-era manga were undeniably high quality, but they also benefited from the dividends of global digital distribution. The following day, Wednesday of the first week of February arrived. The latest issue of Hunter x Hunter officially went on sale alongside the new volume of Dream Comic Journal. In this week's chapter, Leorio and Kurapika, who had been absent for several months, finally reappeared and began preparations to reunite with Gon and Killua. The story quietly entered a new arc. The Phantom Troop arc. For current readers of Hunter x Hunter, most of them had yet to realize what this truly meant. A host of manga groups, critics, and industry organizations in Japan did not initially find this development particularly remarkable. Although Hunter x Hunter clearly possessed enormous potential, its weekly votes in Dream Comic Journal had merely stabilized at over 1 million. However, because the manga had been serialized for too short a time, its average volume sales had not yet broken the 10 million threshold. In the Japanese manga industry, a work's true standing is ultimately determined by its average volume sales performance, not short-term popularity. Among the 6 major manga journals in Japan, there were currently 16 ongoing series with average volume sales exceeding 10 million copies. At the very top of the industry stood Echoes of the End, the number 1 ranked work serialized in Monogatari comic. Together with Burning Sun and The Last Dragonborn, it formed the 3 pillar works of Monogatari comic journal. These 3 series ranked 1st, 3rd, and 6th, respectively, in average volume sales among all currently serialized manga in Japan, with figures of 19.4 million, 16.8 million, and 14 million copies per volume. Ranked 2nd was the flagship title of Koken Manga, the fantasy horror combat series Paradise of the Dead, with an average of 17.5 million copies per volume. As for Source War Chronicle, which had long dominated weekly votes in Dream Comic Journal and was currently ranked 2nd in popularity, it placed 4th overall, with average volume sales of 15.5 million copies per volume. At this stage, Hunter x Hunter was clearly in a phase of explosive popularity growth. But no matter how quickly popularity rose, average volume sales could only accumulate gradually. A few months of strong sales could not easily surpass the cumulative results of works serialized steadily for several years. Thus, in the current Japanese manga market, Hunter x Hunter's average volume sales ranked 17th overall just the previous week, at 9.9 million copies per volume. Then, the day after the latest issue of Hunter x Hunter went on sale, the Hojimori Group officially announced the news across Japan. Hunter x Hunter had officially surpassed 10 million average volume sales, becoming the fastest manga in Japanese history to reach this milestone. At the same time, the announcement confirmed that the manga had entered a brand new storyline arc, the Phantom Troop arc. Of course, even after becoming the 17th currently serialized manga to exceed 10 million average volume sales, most industry observers believed that Hunter x Hunter would still require 1 to 2 more years of accumulation before it could realistically challenge the top 10, or even top 5, rankings. From an industry perspective, this was already considered extraordinarily fast. However, Rei did not see it that way at all. His planned serialization timeline for Hunter x Hunter was never meant to stretch that long, so how could he afford to wait? Rei understood better than anyone that Hunter x Hunter was about to truly take off after entering this arc. Everything before the Phantom Troop arc had functioned primarily as world building and an introduction to the Nen ability system. Only with this arc would the full appeal of Nen, its strategy, brutality, and emotional weight, begin to emerge. From this point onward, the manga's discussion volume, popularity, and influence would expand at a pace far exceeding its current growth. Yet at this moment, no one in the Japanese manga industry had realized it. Chapter 160, Vision. February 5, Lunar New Year's Eve. Although the weather in the Tokyo area was still cold, the streets and alleys were already filled with a festive atmosphere. Most of the staff at the Hojimori group had already begun their holiday, and REI had submitted the latest Hunter x Hunter manuscript to the editorial department 2 weeks in advance. Misaki had also set aside her work 2 days earlier. As for REI himself, as the creator of both the One Punch Man anime and the Hunter x Hunter manga, he still had a few unavoidable obligations. Like other animation creators in Japan, he needed to record short New Year greeting videos for his fans. In addition, he had to record promotional material for 5 cm per second, which was scheduled to premiere on February 14, in cooperation with the film's distributor. Of course, REI's exclusive camerawoman was Mayu. He had no intention of hiring a professional just for something like this. That would be unnecessary trouble. Besides, both of them were manga artists serialized in Dream Comic and often had similar needs, so helping each other out was only natural. After setting the camera down, Mayu rubbed her slightly sore arm and asked casually. "By the way, REI, do you have any plans for tomorrow?" She paused, then added curiously. "Are you going to spend the spring festival alone again, like last year and the year before?" "Yes," REI replied calmly. "You know my parents have passed away." Mayu hesitated for a moment before continuing. "My sister said that if you don't mind, you could come to our place for dinner tomorrow afternoon. It'll be livelier with more people." "To your house?" REI asked. "You don't want to?" "No, I was just curious." "Honestly," Mayu said with a smile, "my sister thinks you're too pitiful, spending the spring festival alone every year. She can't stand seeing that. Last year and the year before, my sister and I even talked about you during New Year's, wondering what you'd be doing at home all by yourself." "And what did you imagine?" REI asked. "Drawing manga." REI didn't deny it. "Even though I draw quickly, producing more than 40 pages every week isn't something I can always finish on schedule. During spring festival, holidays, and weekends, I usually work at full speed. On regular school days, I draw a little less. On top of that, there's the One Punch Man anime script. Over the past few months, I've also been responsible for character designs and music planning. Sometimes I even have to go out for dinners and meetings with partner companies." All right, stop," Mayu interrupted, her expression turning strange. "My head's spinning." She stared at him for a moment. "Just answer me one thing. Are you working at home, or are you coming to my place for dinner?" "Of course I'll go," REI replied without hesitation. "I'm not a born workaholic. If there's fun to be had, I won't refuse." "And your manga? Your work?" Mayu asked. "If I really can't finish, I'll take a break," REI said with a smile. "All my work is done on the premise that it doesn't harm my health." After all, Yoshihiro Togashi had taken more than 10 years of breaks while serializing Hunter x Hunter. For REI, taking 10 days or even half a month off would hardly be a problem. "Then," Mayu asked suddenly, "are you free on February 14th?" REI thought for a moment. "Yes. I'm interested in the 5 cm per second movie premiere. Want to go together?" "Of course," REI nodded. As the original author of 5 cm per second, he would definitely attend the premiere. And since Mayu didn't mind watching a movie with him, he certainly had no reason to refuse. With just a few sentences, the arrangements were settled. That evening, REI posted the greeting videos recorded earlier in the day. There were New Year messages for One Punch Man fans, Hunter x Hunter fans, and fans of the upcoming 5 cm per second film. He also released a greeting video for the currently airing Hikaru no Go anime. The comment section beneath that video, however, was filled with curses. After all, the most recent episodes had depicted Sai's disappearance. With the enhancement of music and visuals, the anime version of Sai's farewell was even more emotionally devastating than in the manga. On the other hand, news of the live-action adaptation of 5 cm per second immediately energized REI's fanbase. Across various forums, fans eagerly began promoting the film on their own, acting as spontaneous and enthusiastic marketers. Among REI's current active fans, fewer than one-third had actually read the 5 cm per second manga. A large portion of his fanbase had only heard of this early work. Whether out of laziness or a lack of interest in the genre, many had never bought the tankban to read it. But a movie was different. Reading manga required time and focus, but for a film, all you had to do was buy a ticket, sit in a theater, and relax. Because of that, many people were genuinely looking forward to the movie adaptation of 5 cm per second. Moreover, it was being released on such a sensitive date, February 14th. In a way, going to see the film could also be considered a form of support for Shirogane. I'll definitely go support it. I fell in love with teacher Shirogana's work starting with 5 cm per second. What kind of results do you think this movie will achieve? Do you think the total box office can exceed 300 million? I think that'll be difficult. Teacher Shirogane is famous, sure, but most of his fans are more focused on anime. And the February 14th slot comes right after the Spring Festival period, which starts on the 7th. For a movie like 5 cm per second, with a total investment of less than 50 million, reaching 1 to 200 million at the box office, and then making additional profits through streaming rights and peripheral licensing, would already be considered a success. Don't underestimate teacher Shirogane. Once his otaku fans get serious, their spending power is no joke. What otaku fans? Most 5 cm per second manga readers are women, okay. Just imagining all the couples in Japan going to the cinema on Valentine's Day to watch this movie makes me laugh. The distributor of 5 cm per second is a real genius. On Lunar New Year's Eve, REI's fans continued to argue enthusiastically with anti-fans and media outlets online. That evening, REI changed into clean, neat clothes and arrived at Mayu's home ahead of the agreed time. There, he saw a side of the two sisters he had never seen before. At the very least, despite being billionaires, they personally prepared the New Year's Eve dinner themselves. And more surprisingly, their cooking skills were genuinely good, far exceeding REI's expectations. As night fell, fireworks bloomed across the Tokyo sky. Standing together on the large second-floor balcony and watching the scenery, Misaki spoke first. I hope that next year, the sales of the Hunter x Hunter tankban can exceed 15 million per volume, not only surpassing Source War Chronicle in ranking, but also in reputation. And that its average sales per volume can catch up as well, truly becoming the #1 manga in Dream Comic. Then Mayu spoke, her eyes reflecting the exploding fireworks. My New Year's wish is for my manga to get an anime adaptation next year. It's finally climbed to 13th place, it feels like an adaptation isn't that far away anymore. As she spoke, she couldn't help glancing at REI. Her wish was for her work to be animated. As for REI, 3 of his works had already been animated, or were confirmed for adaptation, and all of them were major hits. When neither of them heard REI speak for a while, Mayu finally asked. REI, what's your New Year's wish? To reach the top, REI replied with a chuckle. In every sense, to reach the summit of Japan's animation industry. Misaki and Mayu both froze. REI's tone was casual, almost joking. But for some reason, both of them could clearly feel that he meant every word. Chapter 161, Release of 5 cm/second and Spring Festival. During the Spring Festival period, major comic magazines across Japan continued their regular serializations. And it was precisely during this festive period that the plot of Hunter x Hunter began to surge toward its first true climax. Kurapika, carrying the blood feud of his annihilated clan against the Phantom Troop, arrived in Yornu City to seek revenge. In order to gather intelligence on the troop, he chose to work as a bodyguard for the daughter of a mafia boss in this world-famous criminal metropolis. Just as his information suggested, members of the Phantom Troop appeared in Yornu City and launched an attack on a large-scale underground auction. In response to the robbery, the true rulers of Yornu City, the 10 elders, dispatched their non-ability users, the Shadow Beasts, to intercept the troop members as they attempted to withdraw after sowing chaos. In the latest chapter, one particular character ignited intense excitement among Hunter x Hunter readers. Uvajin. Despite being only a regular member of the Phantom Troop, Uvajin demonstrated terrifying combat power. In battle, he killed and consumed human flesh. His roar alone could kill through sound waves, and a single punch could carve a crater dozens of meters wide into the ground. What do shonen manga readers love the most? Without question, combat. Previously, the manga had leaned heavily toward strategy and setup, with relatively few large-scale battles. But after this chapter's release, readers finally gained a clearer understanding of the combat ceiling in Hunter x Hunter. And most importantly, despite Yuvigin's overwhelming strength, he was captured alive by Kurapika. I'm a bit confused by the nin system. Isn't it just Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu? What are these contract and vow chains? Ten and Hatsu are basic nin applications. Kurapika's chains feel more like a rule-based ability. Let's see how teacher Shirogane explains it. For now, we know one thing, his ability becomes absurdly strong against troop members. Shonen manga needs more fights like this. I feel like Yuvigin is the combat ceiling. You're overthinking it. At the very least, the troop leader has to be stronger. The moment Yuvigin and Kurapika appeared, Gon and Killua instantly felt like rookies. They only learned nin after the Hunter exam, any random troop member could probably kill them instantly. These past few weeks of Hunter x Hunter have been insanely addictive. I can't stop reading. Definitely. The story jumped several levels the moment it entered the Yornu arc. Now I really want to see what the troop leader looks like, someone who can suppress a lunatic like Hisoka. When is teacher Shirogane going to start releasing 2 chapters a week? Capturing Yuvigin alive is just the beginning. Kurapika is definitely going to face retaliation from the entire troop. I can feel it already. Yornu City is going to turn into a massive group battle with Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio versus the troop. This manga is about to hit its real peak. Japanese manga readers are sharp. Often, it takes only 2 chapters for them to determine whether a new arc is truly good. And their approval was obvious. The latest chapter received a record-breaking 1.15 million votes in Dream Comic. Sunday, February 14th. The live-action film adaptation of 5 cm per second premiered simultaneously in major cities across Japan. Rei himself did not have particularly high expectations for the box office. In his previous life, 5 cm per second had never been a strong commercial performer. Moreover, romance works inherently have limited mass-market appeal. However, supported by fans of One Punch Man and Hunter x Hunter, along with students and white-collar workers enjoying both time and disposable income during the Spring Festival holiday, the film's opening day box office reached 41 million. Rei and Mayu already knew the story well, so when they attended an early screening that morning, their expressions remained relatively calm. That said, when the final train scene appeared on screen, both of them still felt that familiar discomfort in their hearts. Even when you know the ending, watching it again still hurts. There is still regret. And the actors' performances were genuinely excellent, their acting remained strong from beginning to end. If even Rei and Mayu felt this way, one could easily imagine the emotional damage inflicted on ordinary moviegoers who had never read the original manga and had no idea what kind of story they were walking into. That night, countless audience, practically grinding their teeth, tracked down Rei's creator account across various platforms. The same storm of complaints that had once accompanied the manga's serialization erupted again. As people walked out of the theater, many could still hear the metallic clatter of train tracks echoing in their ears. They were emotionally wrecked. That evening, after watching 5 cm per second, large numbers of viewers first gave the film high ratings on major platforms. Then, inevitably, they began publishing long posts pointing out every perceived flaw, questioning casting choices, complaining that the male lead was too handsome to feel relatable, and nitpicking any detail they could find. After all, for original fans, a perfect adaptation does not exist. Overall, the public reception was clearly much better than that of most other manga adaptations. Rei himself felt no particular emotional turbulence over the box office performance of 5 cm per second. Or rather, the results were entirely within his expectations. Among Makoto Shinkai's works, 5 cm per second undeniably belongs to the lower tier in terms of commercial potential. Its themes and content simply do not lend themselves to becoming a mainstream blockbuster. However, a large number of Japanese film and television media professionals were stunned, their jaws nearly dropping. From Rei's perspective, as long as the film did not lose money, it was already a success. Even if it performed poorly, making a modest profit was enough. There was never any real risk for the production company. But in the eyes of many professionals in the film industry, releasing such a deeply melancholic movie during the Valentine's Day slot should have been a guaranteed failure. And yet, it still achieved a first-day box office of over 40 million. Were Japanese movie audiences really this tolerant? Wasn't this Shirogane's debut manga work? A script written by Shiro Gain when he was only 16 years old was still this popular years later? After the first day box office numbers were announced, Opinion Hub and several other platforms immediately opened dedicated discussion sections for the 5 cm per second film. People complained loudly online, but when it came time to give scores, they were honest with their hearts and rated the film highly. The tragic ending could only be blamed on the author's cruelty. But that did not diminish the emotional resonance and inspiration the story gave its audience. That said, the overall influence of 5 cm per second as a film was likely to stop here. REI never expected it to perform spectacularly during the Spring Festival period or become some kind of box office dark horse. Still, as the first live-action adaptation of one of his manga works, both its reputation and box office performance were more than acceptable. And there was one particularly noteworthy point. The Spring Festival period ended quickly. The film market also cooled rapidly from its previously overheated state. Movies that had been earning over 100 million per day during the holiday saw their daily box office figures cut in half almost overnight. However, 5 cm per second did not experience a sharp decline. Supported by a large number of REI's anime fans and bolstered by strong word of mouth, its daily box office remained above 20 million. In mid-February, after attending the final fan meet and greet event with the film distributor, REI finally shifted his focus away from 5 cm per second. His attention returned fully to his other works. Both Hunter x Hunter and One Punch Man were continuing to steadily accumulate popularity in their respective fields of manga and animation. As for REI's newly announced animation project, Arcane. Thanks to the Spring Festival period being peak season for job hopping across all industries in Japan, something significant happened behind the scenes. While REI was busy handling matters related to the 5 cm per second film, Himura did not rest for a single day during the holiday. Using the production funds provided by REI, she aggressively recruited a large number of talented professionals from various animation studios across Japan. When this group of newly hired staff arrived at Illumination Production Company after the Spring Festival, they were collectively dumbfounded. Because based on what they learned shortly after joining, Shiro Gain was preparing to invest at least 1.5 billion yen in the production of the first season of Arcane. A single seasonal animation. Even though the plan indicated that each episode would be quite long, around 40 minutes. An investment of 1 billion yen was still staggering. Shiro Gain, this 18-year-old genius, truly did not treat money as money. No one believed REI was a reckless fool who didn't understand financial realities. Which meant only one thing. Shiro Gain genuinely believed this animation possessed that level of potential. A work worthy of a 1 billion investment, and that was only the production cost for its first season. What kind of expectations did Shiro Gain have for this work's future performance to make such a bold decision? Chapter 162, March. Throughout February, the serialized storyline of Hunter x Hunter revolved entirely around the escalating conflict and tension between Kurapika and the Phantom Troop. At the same time, One Punch Man entered the original arc in which Saitama, tempted by prize money, impersonated Charanko, Bang's disciple who had been severely injured by Garu, and participated in the martial arts tournament. Both works had reached the climactic phase of their respective arcs. With the release of the 4th volume of Hunter x Hunter, its first week sales once again set a new record for the series, reaching 6.12 million copies. Although the growth rate of One Punch Man's viewership slowed slightly after breaking the 6% threshold, its ratings continued to climb steadily, eventually reaching 6.69%. The past 2 episodes stabilized firmly around this level. In terms of sheer popularity, One Punch Man as an anime clearly commanded a broader audience and far greater online buzz. However, the Hunter x Hunter anime was also scheduled to air later this year. In fact, a number of professionals within Japan's animation industry had already begun to sense something important. If Hunter x Hunter were animated, its single-volume manga sales would almost certainly surge dramatically. Among the 17 manga in Japan with average per-volume sales exceeding 10 million copies, Hunter x Hunter was the only one that had not yet received an anime adaptation. Even so, its manga sales were still rising at a pace far surpassing those of the other works in that tier. It could only be said that the release of the 5 cm per second movie in February had temporarily drawn public attention away from REI's other projects. Now, looking back, it was clear that whether adapted from manga or created as original works, REI's creations had already dominated the Japanese animation market throughout the previous year. Among the 5 nominations for Anime of the Year, Hikaru no Go and One Punch Man alone occupied 2 slots, with Hikaru no Go ultimately winning the award. And this year, unless something completely unexpected occurred, the annual animation viewership champion would almost certainly still belong to One Punch Man Season 2. But the most critical battlefield was the manga market. After entering the Your New City arc and introducing the Phantom Troupe in full force, the popularity of Hunter x Hunter expanded at an almost exaggerated pace. Not only were Dream comic readers showering it with praise online, readers from other manga magazines, influenced by word of mouth and reviews, began purchasing the collected volumes and likewise gave overwhelmingly positive feedback. The media no longer held back. As March arrived, a wave of reports from anime critics and news agencies swept across Japan. Hunter x Hunter's average volume sales surpassed 10.9 million copies, ranking 15th among currently serialized manga. In less than half a month, its average sales had increased by nearly 1 million. The strongest prodigy in the history of Japan's animation industry, 18-year-old Shirogane was already approaching the summit of the industry. Hunter x Hunter's single-volume sales continued to expand rapidly. With its anime set to air in July, could it break into the top 10, or even threaten the top 5, or top 3? The explosive rise of Hunter x Hunter drove Dream Comics' weekly circulation past the 20 million mark. Shirogane and Hunter x Hunter had completely become the flagship face of the Hojimori group. When March began and the new semester started, Rei could clearly feel the change. As he walked around campus, more and more eyes followed him. Students from other departments and even other colleges began approaching him intentionally or unintentionally. Professors also started showing unusual enthusiasm, asking whether Illumination Production Company, Rei's partner studio, planned to recruit graduates from the university in July. Naturally, Rei wanted to avoid such complications. But the reality was that he frequently took leave for work, and although his final exam scores from the previous semester were solid, strict enforcement of attendance rules could still have put several courses at risk. In the end, however, Rei passed all subjects in his first semester. Even in the 2 courses where his scores were borderline, the instructors gave him high attendance marks, allowing him to pass overall. As a result, when faced with these overtures from the faculty, Rei didn't hesitate for long and agreed. Recruiting a handful of senior students into Illumination Production Company was entirely feasible. Every company needs entry-level talent. It all depends on whether management is willing to invest time and effort into training newcomers. And with Rei as an investor, he certainly had enough influence with him or it to make that happen. However, as time entered March, aside from these relatively trivial matters, Rei, as one of the Hojimori group's most prominent manga artists, also began to have more frequent contact with the group's senior management. Naturally, the relationship between the two sides had become rather delicate. After Rei rejected the proposal to serialize Arcane within the Hojimori group, the group's upper management did not express their dissatisfaction openly. Still, Rei had someone on the inside, so he had a general understanding of their attitude. Well, there are indeed a few conservative old-timers on the board who are very dissatisfied with you, Misaki said frankly when discussing the matter with Rei. After knowing Rei for 3 years, their relationship had long since gone beyond that of editor and manga artist. They were also close friends, so she didn't avoid sensitive topics. Many of the senior executives still hold very old-fashioned views. They believe it's the group and the magazine that make manga artists famous, so their attitude tends to be domineering. You're now considered the #1 manga artist among all those contracted by the group, so you'll inevitably have more interactions with them in the future. If you don't like what they say, just don't take it to heart. They're not singling you out, they treat everyone the same way. I understand, Rei replied. Especially since I previously turned down their request, it must be difficult for you, being caught in the middle. This kind of situation is actually very common, Misaki said softly, taking a sip of tea. It's not rare at all for top manga artists from other magazines to clash with their publishers. Some are unhappy about unfair profit distribution, some resent the group interfering with their storylines, and others are furious because the animation studio assigned by the group butchered their work, causing backlash that even affected the manga's serialization. She paused briefly, then continued. And Rei, you're actually extremely lucky. The Hikaru no Go anime received overwhelming praise, which directly boosted manga sales. On top of that, you became famous far too quickly. The group didn't even have time to lock you into those high-paying but highly restrictive contracts. That means they can barely control you contractually now. You're free to draw manga, invest in animation, or do whatever else you want. They're annoyed, but there's nothing they can do about it. I understand, Rei nodded slightly. Thank you, Editor Misaki. Of course. Since we're already talking about this, Misaki said, looking at him, regarding the increase in remuneration you asked me to negotiate with senior management. The group has agreed to raise your copyright distribution ratio. However, they're hoping you'll sign a long-term cooperation agreement, one that gives Hojimori Group priority for your future works, unless the group explicitly declines interest. Alright, Editor Misaki, you don't need to continue, Rei said immediately, without hesitation. I will never sign that kind of contract. I expected that answer, Misaki nodded calmly. Most top manga artists in Japan are bound by similar agreements. The highest copyright distribution ratios always come with stricter contractual conditions. The price of freedom is reduced profit. That's true not just for Hojimori Group, but for any manga publisher. If you want the special treatment, you can't avoid restrictions. But even so, freedom matters more to me. Since that's your decision, Rei continued, I won't make things difficult for you, Editor Misaki. My contract can remain as it is under the existing terms. Misaki paused for a moment after hearing that, then gave a small nod. Chapter 163, Hero. From that point on, Rei's daily life revolved around 3 titles, Hunter x Hunter, One Punch Man, and Arcane. Stretched too thin, Rei followed advice and hired several experienced manga assistants to help with Hunter x Hunter. Aside from key characters and major fight scenes, he delegated background work and minor characters to them, providing only clear and concise storyboards. The final pages weren't quite as polished as when he worked alone, he planned to touch them up later, but the time saved made the compromise worthwhile. Online, discussion around Hunter x Hunter continued to surge. At the same time, however, some One Punch Man fans began voicing dissatisfaction with the plot. Season 2 wasn't bad, but compared to Season 1, it felt slightly off. The main source of complaints was the mid-season martial arts tournament. Saitama entering the tournament felt like an ancestor bullying his descendants. Normally, he one-punches monsters, pure, effortless catharsis. But in a Dragon Ball-style tournament, he had to hold back, avoid exposing his identity, avoid killing anyone, and exchange blows with weak opponents for episode after episode. 1 or 2 episodes would have been fine, but the arc dragged into its 4th week. Fans began flooding Rei's comment sections. Please end the tournament already and move on to the Monster Association arc. Where's Garu? 4 episodes of build-up and now he's gone. I actually like the tournament, why all the hate? It's not that the arc is bad, but think about Season 1. Saitama fought Vaccine Man, the Giant Brothers, the House of Evolution, Rhinoceros Beetle, and finally the Cosmic Overlord Boros. Shounen rules say the threats should escalate, why does it feel like we're going backward? Exactly. After some fodder monsters and meeting King, we watched Garu steamroll weaklings, and now Saitama's stuck fighting random martial artists like Bakuzen and nameless nobodies. Even A and B class heroes are hogging screen time. It's frustrating. Bring on the Monster Association already. I think Suiryu is pretty cool, though. He's strong and determined. He could even join the Hero Association as an S-class hero. Still, something feels off. Saitama enters for prize money, spends 4 episodes in the tournament, then gets disqualified because of a wig? That payoff feels weak. Maybe tonight's episode will turn things around. Is the show peaking too early? Maybe Shirogane doesn't know how to write an invincible protagonist anymore, that's why people are complaining. Decker typed furiously, arguing back against the skeptics. Sure, Season 2 wasn't as immediately explosive as Season 1 but it was still the top anime of the season. And more importantly, he trusted Shirogane. Shirogane once spent 4 entire chapters in 5 cm per second focusing on a single missed connection scene. Perhaps One Punch Man Season 2 was doing something similar. Time passed quickly, and soon it was 8 p.m. One Punch Man's explosive opening theme played. After a minute, the episode picked up exactly where last week left off. Because Saitama's wig violated the rules, Suiryu won by default. The tournament ended in absurd farce. As Suiryu watched Saitama leave, still unsatisfied, a towering, ogre-like monster strode into the arena. It was Kuketsu, the champion from 2 tournaments ago. He calmly explained how he had reached the limits of humanity, consumed a monster cell, and gained overwhelming power. His goal was simple: force the strongest martial artists present to eat monster cells and join the Monster Association in opposition to the Hero Association. Decker froze for a moment, then his eyes lit up. So the tournament and the Monster Association were connected. What followed was straightforward. One by one, martial artists bowed to Gokutsu's strength, swallowed the monster cells, and transformed into powerful monsters on the spot. They clashed with Hero Association professionals and the remaining fighters. Decker relaxed slightly as the fodder battles unfolded. By now, he understood One Punch Man's narrative rhythm. Minor characters struggle first. Then, at the critical moment, Saitama arrives and ends everything. It was a simple formula, but it was exactly this formula that made the anime this year's breakout hit. Anyone could imitate the structure. No one could replicate the characters. Just as Decker expected, the story unfolded accordingly. When every hero present was pushed to their limit, Suiryu stepped forward and single-handedly wiped out a group of newly monster-ified fighters whose power had skyrocketed. But when he faced Bakuzan, whose strength had multiplied several times over after becoming a monster, Suiryu was utterly crushed, unable to fight back. And even then, Bakuzan was still far weaker than Gokutsu. Whenever Saitama was on screen, Decker felt at ease. He knew Saitama would never let anyone die. But now, Saitama wasn't there. Decker swallowed hard. For the first time in a long while, he genuinely felt the pressure of the story. Suiryu was smashed into the ground by Gokutsu in an instant. Before leaving, Gokutsu casually tossed the jealous monster Bakuzan a glance, letting him stay behind to finish the job. One Punch Man isn't about how flashy the fights are, it's about the choices characters make in the most critical second. Strong, handsome, arrogant, Suiryu could have fled at any moment. Yet he stayed and fought, unwilling to disappoint the fans who adored him. All the perfect halos the story had given him shattered the moment he staggered to his feet, gasping for breath, panic flooding his eyes. His escape was ugly. Desperate. Driven by nothing but the instinct to survive. And in the very next moment, Bakuzan slapped him back into the dirt. Decker sucked in a sharp breath, nausea twisting in his stomach. Saitama, please show up. In Ari's previous life, Bakuzan had been one of the most infamous monsters among One Punch Man fans. He even had a nickname. The Disgrace of Dragon Level. After all, no other Dragon Level monster in the entire series carried himself with such pathetic swagger. Then came Bakuzan's most reviled line. Suiryu lay on the ground, crying, begging for mercy. A dignified villain would either spare him or kill him cleanly. Bakuzan didn't bother with dignity. Back when he was human, just watching Suiryu dominate the ring had crushed his spirit, he'd believed victory was forever out of reach. But now, Suiryu. I just love bullying people weaker than me. That grotesque monster grin ignited Decker's fury. Suiryu's despair felt unbearably real. His breakdown, his screaming for anyone to save him, tore straight at the chest. Then Saitama arrived. As naturally as breathing. As casually as walking into a convenience store. One punch, still just one punch, erased Bakuzan completely in Suiryu's eyes. But when Saitama learned that the Monster Association had already ruined the tournament, he turned to chase after the departed Gokutsu. Only for Suiryu to grab his leg in panic. He didn't want his savior to die. He begged Saitama not to throw his life away. By now, Decker was laughing through the tension. Saitama ignored him and left anyway. Left behind, broken and bleeding, Suiryu blamed himself. I've met a real hero. Someone like him shouldn't die here. He could save so many more people. But he couldn't stand. He couldn't help anymore. Fear had shattered him, but once the danger passed, he still worried about others. Suiryu. Decker's eyes burned. That's what One Punch Man does. Just when you think the plot is slowing down, side characters like Momen Rider or Suiryu strike with raw, unexpected emotion. And then, that emotion vanished instantly. Gokutsu's massive head suddenly dropped into view. The timing was perfect. It was hilarious. Saitama strolled back, utterly relaxed. Was Gokutsu strong? Suiryu asked in disbelief. Well, when they only take one punch it's kind of hard to compare. Suiryu hesitated, then spoke. I don't know if I can ever overcome my fear. But, do you think I could become a hero? In his eyes, Saitama's smooth, egg-like head reflected clearly. Even watching through the screen, Decker felt it. In that moment, Saitama was literally a beam of light. Could I become a hero too? Suiryu's question echoed the hearts of the viewers. Hero? Saitama replied casually. If even I can do it, anyone can. That offhand line carved itself deep into Decker's chest, as if he himself had been acknowledged. When the ending song finally played, Decker let out a long breath. His eyes were damp, not quite tears, but close. Overall, One Punch Man is a comedy. And yet, every so often, in the smallest moments, it makes you want to cry. Who could dislike a character like Saitama? Who said this arc was boring? Who claimed Shirogane had run out of talent, that One Punch Man had already peaked and would collapse? This was explosive. This was brilliant. Chapter 164, Omen. Very few series remain engaging from beginning to end. Most inevitably hit a lull somewhere during serialization. For several weeks, many One Punch Man viewers had begun questioning the show, feeling that Season 2 lacked the punch and novelty of Season 1. But the moment this episode aired, the reputation flipped overnight. Open any forum and the boring plot threads were gone, replaced by heated discussions dissecting every scene. Especially the dragon-level disgrace, Bakuzen. Back in Rei's previous life, Murata, the redraw artist of the One Punch Man manga, wasn't universally criticized for every deviation from the original webcomic. In fact, during the martial arts tournament arc, Bakuzen was an entirely original character created by Murata, and fans loved him the moment the chapter dropped. The same applied to the Monster Association arc and Murata's original creation, the Monster King Orokai. Reception for Orokai was mixed, and many readers jokingly dubbed him Monster King Dumchi, yet even so, Murata's spontaneous creative additions clearly had value. The redrawn manga was a major reason One Punch Man exploded globally in that life. It was only much later, when he began inventing elements like Blast, that the story truly derailed. Because of that, the One Punch Man anime Rei produced in this Japan followed neither one's version nor Murata's version verbatim. Instead, Rei cherry-picked. He kept the fan-favorite elements and cut the universally disliked ones. Judging by tonight's broadcast, the cultures of the two worlds were similar enough that the ripple effects aligned almost perfectly. At the very least, this tournament arc successfully diluted the fatigue caused by Garu's slow burn development. Everyone knew Garu would eventually be defeated by Saitama in one punch, yet the story kept lavishing screen time on his growth. Fans had grown impatient. He's just going to lose in one punch anyway, what's the point of all this build-up? Thanks to the explosive discussion surrounding Bakuzen, One Punch Man's ratings rose again the next day, closing at 6.71%, a new series high. Riding this momentum, Rei announced via his creator account that One Punch Man Tankban volumes would soon be released. Many fans had already watched the anime, but animation can never include every panel, side character, or bit of detail. And manga volumes remain one of the most important merchandise revenue streams. Adaptation cycles like this are common in otaku culture. In Rei's previous life, after 5 cm per second became popular, it spawned novels, manga adaptations, and more. Of course, Rei wouldn't be drawing the One Punch Man volumes himself, he simply didn't have the time. He planned to provide detailed storyboards and recruit top-tier manga artists to handle the artwork, turning it into a collaborative project. If you want an IP to grow, you need a complete merchandise ecosystem. After all, plenty of readers in Japan don't watch anime at all, they only buy manga. Soon, it was mid-March. One Punch Man Season 2 was approaching its finale. After the tournament arc ended, the story returned to Garu's assault on the Hero Association. This time, his targets escalated from low-ranking heroes to S-class. He even challenged Genos, though at his current level, Genos still managed to suppress him. By the end of the season, the Monster Association fully took center stage, laying the groundwork for the next phase. Season 3 would be a direct confrontation. Hero Association vs Monster Association. Meanwhile, Hunter x Hunter finally hit its true stride. Nearly a year into serialization, past the Hunter exam, the Zaldik Estate, and Heaven's Arena, the story had now entered Yornu City. Led by Kurapika, with Gon, Killua, and Leorio supporting him, the main cast targeted the phantom troop lurking in the shadows of the Mafia metropolis, poised to unleash bloodshed. This week, the clash began. Kurapika confronted Yuvajin head-on, revealing an ability usable only against members of the Phantom Troop. By paying a terrible price, he gained overwhelming dominance, brutally extracting information from Uvajin. Uvajin chose death over betrayal. Having avenged his clan yet sinking into guilt, Kurapika executed him. At the same time, the supposedly monstrous Phantom Troop displayed unwavering loyalty to one another. They might slaughter without hesitation, but for their comrades and their leader, every one of them was willing to die. The portrayal of these characters, and the unveiling of Kurapika's distorted Nin ability, dragged countless silent readers out of the shadows. Damn, I thought the Nin system was garbage. Turns out it's insanely fun. Kurapika's chains are ridiculously complex, in the best way. After this chapter, Gon and Killua feel like beginners. Who's the real protagonist now? I always thought battle manga was just bigger energy blasts. Didn't know abilities could be designed like this. All those categories, specialist, conjurer, enhancer, emitter, I thought Shirogane sensei was flexing. Turns out it all matters. Enhancers took a massive hit this week. All muscle, no brain? Gon, Uvajin and Kurapika's line, "You're just an enhancer," had me dying. Same from the Hunter exam, yet Kurapika's growth is terrifying. I love Kurapika, but he's too gentle. Killing Uvajin, probably his first kill, left him shattered even though it was revenge. Why aren't the tankman sales exploding yet? Series way worse than Hunter averaged 13-14 million per volume, Hunter's only at 11. It's been serialized less than a year. Fastest series in Japan to break 10 million per volume, relax. Hope Hunter eventually tops the charts. I was a hardcore Monogatari comic reader until my little sister dragged me into Hunter. Now Hunter's number one in my heart, Echoes of the End is second. Same. I still buy Monogatari comic weekly, but now I grab Dream comic too. Hunter's the only series that leaves me this addicted, long chapters, insane quality, weird pull. Waiting every week is torture. Shirogane sensei and his cliffhangers, sigh. Chapter 165, Explosion. Once the Hunter x Hunter storyline entered the Phantom Troop arc in Your New City, the manga's weekly sales began changing almost every 7 days. It had only just broken through 10 million average volume sales in late February. By mid to late March, that figure had already surged to nearly 12 million. Among currently serialized manga in Japan, its average volume ranking climbed from 17th in early March to 13th. At its current rate of tankman growth, by April Hunter x Hunter will likely surpass 13 million average volume sales and force its way into the national top 10 of ongoing series. This pace can no longer be described as fast. It's riding a rocket. When a manga's average volume sales are below 10 million, rapid jumps are understandable. But the market has a ceiling. Once a series crosses the 10 million threshold, its growth curve typically flattens. Most titles at that level might add less than 1 million copies in an entire year, and if the current arc underperforms, numbers can even decline. So who has ever seen something as outrageous as Hunter adding a full million in barely half a month? Of course, Japan has never witnessed a bug-level phenomenon like REI's past life Demon Slayer. One Piece needed 20 years to reach its average volume sales peak. Demon Slayer surpassed it in a single year, and by its finale, had doubled that average outright. Still, Hunter x Hunter is playing a similar catalytic role in today's Japanese market. Not because Hunter is necessarily superior to every top domestic series, but because its style and narrative structure had never existed in Japan before. Readers grow tired of cookie-cutter plots, recycled character archetypes, and formulaic escalation. A work that is clearly innovative, like Hunter, naturally grabs attention. From that perspective, its explosive rise makes sense. And yet, as the numbers became eye-catching, bordering on absurd, online smear campaigns targeting Hunter x Hunter and its author, Shirogane, began surfacing one after another. Anonymous posts accused Shirogane of misconduct in high school, unpaid debts, harassment of women. Some even claimed he assaulted people or verbally abused the homeless. REI and the Hojimori group both understood exactly what was happening. The competition had made its move. Dream Comic was now locked in a brutal fight with Shonen Quest for Japan's number 2 weekly circulation spot. Both hovered around 20 million copies per week, trading wins back and forth. Meanwhile, Monogatari Comic, comfortably entrenched in first place, was equally wary, especially of Hunter. Industry veterans know the truth. For a journal like Dream Comic, with global distribution channels, a single breakout title can add several million copies to annual circulation in under a year. Even Monogatari Comics' seemingly insurmountable multi-million lead could shrink faster than people expect. The mere presence of Hunter x Hunter was already making rivals uneasy. And it hadn't even been serialized for a full year. Give it a few more years, and who could say whether Echoes of the End would still wear the crown as Japan's top manga. Monogatari Comic wasn't sitting idle, either. Most of the troll accounts currently smearing REI online were backed by either Monogatari or Shonen Quest. After finishing his daily pages, REI still made time to skim whatever sensational dirt had surfaced about him that day. He treated it all like stand-up comedy. After laughing it off, REI took out his tools, inhaled deeply, and began designing supporting character sheets for Arcane. That alone devoured several more hours. In the afternoon, Misaki called. A Western television station planned to simulcast the Hunter x Hunter anime starting in July, and REI needed to attend the contract signing the next day. Naturally, he agreed immediately. Then came several more hours of work. Only just before bed did REI finally check the message Mayu had left him. My series Touch of Glass ranked 12th in this week's magazine reader poll. The publisher is releasing its first tankban in May. Also, they're planning to animate it. Pretty awesome, right? Congratulations, REI replied with a smile. If you really want to congratulate me, buy the tankban when Touch of Glass releases, though you're so busy you probably don't even read my series, right? No, I read your manga every single week. REI typed back. After a brief pause, he added another message. Let's both keep pushing. Break into the top 10. Top 10? Top 10 of what? I'm aiming for top 10 average tankban sales with Hunter. You fight for a top 10 popularity spot in Dream Comic. After sending the message, REI glanced out the window at the rainbow neon lights of the city. Late March. In One Punch Man, the anime had reached the arc where Garu assaults the Hero Association, only to be stopped by Genos, who was nearly killed in the brutal clash. At the critical moment, the Monster Association's dragon-level monster, Elder Centipede, appeared. It effortlessly defeated Genos and ordered its underlings to carry away the human who had volunteered to become a monster, the already gravely injured Garu. Its arrival left Genos, the S-class cyborg hero meant to define the combat power ceiling, completely overwhelmed. From here, the plot of One Punch Man smoothly transitioned into the early groundwork of the Monster Association arc. The episode then ended by perfectly echoing and bridging back to the first episode of Season 2. King, S-class rank 7, the so-called strongest man on Earth, whose reputation had been hyped since the season premiere, finally arrived at the battlefield where Garu had defeated the heroes. Just as Elder Centipede emerged, preparing to finish off the unconscious fighters, King raised the megaphone in his hand and loudly announced himself, deliberately drawing the monster's attention in the name of King. Then, at the crucial second, when King was so terrified he nearly wet himself, he shouted for Saitama. Saitama appeared behind him. One punch. Still just one punch. The supposedly invincible, kilometer-long, laser-resistant dragon-level Elder Centipede was annihilated on the spot. And once again, the Hero Association credited the feat to King. On his very first mission responding to the Hero Association's call, he had slain Elder Centipede, an enemy the official records claimed only S-class rank 1 Blast could possibly defeat. Even Blast had merely driven it away in the past. King, meanwhile, had killed it. You could say that the hardest reputation in the world was now firmly set in stone. And everyone watching burst out laughing. After the episode aired, the One Punch Man forum stayed lit all night. Across every major anime platform, King rocketed to the very top of the trending charts with absolute dominance. As the finale of Season 2, the episode left tens of millions of One Punch Man fans thoroughly satisfied. With the upgraded animation quality, even the pickiest viewers couldn't find fault with the battle scenes, every frame screamed money well spent. Meanwhile, over in the manga market, in the final week of March, Hunter x Hunter's tankban sales officially broke the 13 million per volume mark. Many media outlets had predicted the milestone would be reached in April. It arrived early. Total cumulative sales still appeared modest, after all, Hunter had released only a few volumes. But in terms of per-volume performance, it sailed past Shirogana's previous work Hikaru no Go without the slightest resistance, effortlessly surpassing 13 million and storming into the top 10 per-volume sales among currently serialized manga. When the news spread across the media, nearly every manga artist in the country went numb. A freak like Shirogane, once you learn anything about his life, you don't feel inspired. You don't feel healed. You just start wondering whether the two of you are even the same species. Calling him a manga genius suddenly feels understated. He's more like a deity soaring above the heavens. Chapter 166, Popularity. Sometimes, a manga's sudden explosion in popularity arrives without warning for the vast majority of readers. Japan has 6 major manga journals, along with countless small and mid-sized publications. Manga readers' tastes are extremely diverse, some love hot-blooded battle series, others prefer mystery, while many gravitate toward youth romance. For a manga to be considered popular, capturing the attention of even 1/10 of the active reader base is already an outstanding achievement. Before this year, Hunter x Hunter was certainly popular. Its rankings climbed steadily, eventually reaching the top of Dream Comic. Even so, a huge portion of Japan's manga readers either hadn't heard of it at all, or had heard the name but felt no interest. But now, walk through the anime merchandise streets of Tokyo, or any major first or second tier coastal city in Japan. Visit comic conventions large and small. You'll find that whenever manga comes up in conversation, Hunter x Hunter appears with astonishing frequency. Whenever anime is discussed, One Punch Man is impossible to avoid. And whenever people talk about manga artists, Shirogane, that young, diligent, relentlessly hard-working creator who has never produced a bad ending since his debut, even though his stories are often filled with regret, is the name most often mentioned by young ACK fans. ACK commercial streets are plastered with posters of Hunter x Hunter and One Punch Man. And if a shelf in a merchandise store looks suspiciously empty, it's usually because One Punch Man goods have sold out yet again. In bookstores, the single-volume sales sections place Hunter x Hunter in the most prominent locations. After all, a manga experiencing rapid popularity growth attracts far more new readers than long-running titles whose sales have already stabilized. Seeing Hunter x Hunter referenced once or twice in real life, through friends, posters, or street ads, might not spark much interest. But when praise for the series keeps echoing from every direction, it becomes inevitable. Even if you're not a regular reader of Dream Comic, curiosity alone will eventually pull you into a bookstore. This is the explosive momentum created by overwhelming reputation. And it's precisely why Hunter x Hunter's single-volume sales skyrocketed so dramatically in March. That same month, the Hojimori Group invited REI to hold 2 fan-signing events, timed with the release of Hunter x Hunter Volume 5. The turnout was so massive that the original venue proved far too small to contain the crowd. I envy the fans in Tokyo so much. I want a Hunter x Hunter volume signed by teacher Shirogane too. Next time Volume 6 comes out, I'm flying straight to Tokyo. Is anyone selling a hand-signed copy by teacher Shirogane for 500 yen? I'll cover shipping. 500? You're dreaming. Brother, don't come. Shirogane can't take it anymore. I lined up until 4 yesterday, his fingers were already red from holding the pen. Have mercy on him. At this rate, it feels like Hunter x Hunter won't even need a year to break 16 million average sales per volume. That's insane. That's how shonen manga work. Early on, with few chapters, popularity crawls like an insect. But once the serialization deepens and the world building expands, popularity explodes. How far it goes depends entirely on plot quality. If the Your New City arc keeps this level, the average volume sales will absolutely keep climbing. Can someone do the math? How much is Shirogane earning from Hunter x Hunter this year? Just calculate it yourself. He's insanely prolific, at least 7 or 8 volumes a year. At 13 million copies per volume, tens of millions sold annually. Each volume sells for around 500 yen, with an 8% royalty. Just from tankban sales alone, ignoring merchandise, he's already clearing over 520 million yen. Hunter x Hunter is amazing, but One Punch Man is still top tier. Hunter hasn't been animated yet, so it's mostly popular domestically. One Punch Man, though, is huge overseas. I even know friends studying abroad who resell genuine One Punch Man merchandise at a markup. Don't talk about how much teacher Shirogane earns. When other people make money, I think lucky guy. But with Shirogane? You can't even be jealous. It's not luck, it's pure effort and sweat. As someone who self-studied manga in high school, I actually cried when I learned teacher Shirogane updates over 40 pages of Hunter x Hunter every week. What's crazier is that he also worked on the music for One Punch Man, fully handled its scripts and character designs, and now he's still finding time to create Arcane. Having read manga for so many years, I don't respect anyone else, only Shirogane. At 18, his achievements in the anime industry already surpass 99% of his peers, and the number of works he's produced in just 2 years exceeds the lifetime output of 99% of creators. Let's not exaggerate, 99% of creators wouldn't even get 4 works serialized in major journals over their entire careers, let alone in 2 years. Only Shirogane could pull that off. And what's even funnier? His only rejected work was One Punch Man. Just thinking about it makes me laugh. A stain on his life. His one point of similarity with ordinary manga artists, because a manga artist's life isn't complete without at least one rejection. Stop it, I can't hold it in anymore, I'm laughing too hard. Every day, every moment, discussions about Shirogane's works generated massive online buzz. And these conversations, whether praise, jokes, or heated debate, were effectively free promotion. Thus, March came to an end. One Punch Man Season 2 concluded its broadcast with an undeniable 6.75% viewership rating, effortlessly retaining its crown as the highest-rated anime that premiered this season. As for Hikaru no Go, the final season, its ratings remained stable throughout its run, ultimately ranking second among all anime that aired this season. There was only one exception. The episode depicting Sai's disappearance. That week, countless manga readers and drama fans sat glued to their televisions. As a result, Hikaru no Go achieved a 6.43% rating, narrowly surpassing One Punch Man's 6.39% for that same week. But Hikaru no Go only broke the 6% mark once. And that was enough. Soon, April arrived. REI originally planned to transition seamlessly into the broadcast of One Punch Man Season 3. Unfortunately, Capital TV station had other ideas. They didn't learn anything good, but instead picked up one of the worst habits from anime broadcasting in REI's previous life. Recap episodes. And they learned it perfectly. At this point, One Punch Man had become a flagship program for Capital TV station. Weekly advertising slots sold to GG sponsors were worth astronomical sums, so there was no way the station would allow any airtime to go unused. Season 3's episode count wasn't enough to fill the entire spring broadcast window from April to July. So for those extra 1 or 2 weeks, the solution was simple. Replay content, fool the audience, and keep cashing in on sponsorship fees. In the first week of April, a wave of enthusiastic One Punch Man fans eagerly tuned in, fully expecting a new episode. The moment they realized it was a recap episode, the internet exploded. Forums, comment sections, and social platforms were flooded with rage. Capital TV station was instantly blasted onto trending topics, cursed from top to bottom. And the funniest part? That torrent of outrage generated massive traffic, which made Capital TV station happier than ever. Chapter 167, Season 3. At night, REI worked on the original manuscript for Hunter x Hunter while simultaneously dealing with matters from his other projects. The TV station wants to invite me onto their variety show. Reject it directly. I'm already drowning in my own work, where would I find time to help them boost their ratings? A large comic convention wants me as the finale guest? Forget it. I don't have time for non-essential commercial activities. If I had that time, fans would probably rather I draw 2 more pages of manuscript. As he drew, REI handled messages from various collaborators on his phone. After a long stretch of work, REI finally finished the main portion of today's manuscript and let out a long breath. Of course, the work wasn't completely finished, some mechanical, low-skill tasks would later be handed off to his assistants. Only then did he finally have the leisure to check the messages left by fans on his creator account. As expected, the comments were filled with furious complaints about Capital TV station's recap episodes. REI thought for a moment, then selectively replied to a few comments. After that, he paused briefly and began editing a post. The general message was simple, asking everyone to support One Punch Man Season 3, which would premiere next Friday, and expressing his confidence in the content of the upcoming season. In truth, the most exciting part of One Punch Man in his previous life had been the conflict between the Hero Association and the Monster Association. The dozen-plus S-class heroes, who previously existed only in the imagination of manga readers, would almost all shine brilliantly in this arc, receiving rich character development. Especially King. His performance during this arc would generate an endless supply of classic memes. Rei himself was full of anticipation for the third season of the anime, which would officially kick off this storyline. With his current popularity and influence in Japan, even such a casual post triggered a massive reaction. Overnight, it accumulated more than 100,000 comments and was reposted and reported by numerous media outlets. Then, early Sunday morning, Rei received another piece of news from his editor. The first week sales of Hunter x Hunter Volume 5 reached 3,50,00,00 copies. Even Rei found it hard to remain calm after reading the message. Although the series' average sales per volume had not yet broken the 14 million mark, the first week sales alone had already reached a level comparable to Echoes of the End, the current top-selling manga in Japan. And Rei wasn't the only one to receive this news. Before long, Hojimori Group officially announced it on their website. The news sent shockwaves through Japan's manga industry. Could it really be this outrageous? Could the first week sales of Hunter x Hunter Volume 5 really reach such an absurd figure? From that afternoon onward, Hojimori Group wasted no time, immediately spending money to hire online promoters to flood major anime forums and websites with the news. By evening, anime media across Japan were widely reporting on it. The news ignited heated discussions among fan communities. So, how long would it take before Hunter x Hunter's average volume sales reached the top 5? The top 3? Or even first place? Would Monogatari comics' long-standing dominance truly be shaken by Shirogane? These questions became frequent discussion topics among Rei's fanbase. However, by the time Friday of the second week of April arrived, from daytime onward, Rei's fans had largely stopped discussing Hunter x Hunter. Instead, attention rapidly shifted to news about the One Punch Man anime. So, will Garou still get a lot of screen time in Season 3? Teacher Shirogane, please consider cutting him back and focusing more on the S-Class heroes and the Monster Association. It airs at 8 p.m. tonight, we'll know everything soon. Garou really got a bit excessive. Season 2 spent so much time building him up, only for him to still lose to Genos. That was hilarious. Genos was getting wrecked by random monsters in the first episode. I hope Season 3 introduces a villain like Boros. To this day, Saitama vs. Boros in Episode 12 of Season 1 is still the peak of this anime. Yeah, the Monster Association feels pretty weak. If Boros were still alive, he could probably wipe them out by himself. The villains in Season 2 really did feel weak. Now all we can do is look forward to what Season 3 brings. I hope Season 3 of One Punch Man surpasses Season 2 in ratings and sets a new record. This season, I'll watch One Punch Man first. In July, there's also the Hunter x Hunter anime premiere, plus the live-action adaptation of Tonight during summer break. I feel like my entire life is going to be surrounded by Teacher Shirogane's works. A few minutes before the premiere of One Punch Man Season 3, the once noisy discussion forums suddenly went quiet. Across Japan, anime fans were sitting at home, waiting in front of their televisions for the new season to begin. Under these circumstances, capital TV stations' viewership ratings continued to climb steadily. Finally, at exactly 8 o'clock, Capital TV station aired the first episode of One Punch Man Season 3 right on schedule. A brand new opening song. Brand new opening visuals. Rei was never the kind of creator who spoiled key characters outright. But even subtle hints were enough to drive fans wild with curiosity. In the opening, several dragon-level monsters from the Monster Association appeared: Black Sperm, Evil Natural Water, Garou, Orakai, Gums, Giro, Homeless Emperor. Rei deliberately presented these major figures as blurred silhouettes. Their exact appearances were unclear, yet their distinctive outlines were unmistakable. Then, the opening ended with Saitama's iconic One Punch. It could be said that even the opening sequence alone, if watched carefully, revealed an enormous amount of information. As for the episode itself, the plot directly followed the ending of the previous season. Centipede Elder of the Monster Association had attacked a group of heroes and was ultimately killed by the arrival of King. Although the audience knew perfectly well that it was Saitama who delivered the finishing blow. From the Hero Association's perspective, the one who obliterated Centipede Elder could only be King, without question. The first episode briefly revisited these events. Then, it quickly shifted into the core storyline of the new arc. The heavily injured Garou was taken to the Monster Association's headquarters. As a human who hunted heroes, his hero hunter identity intrigued the Monster Association, and they sought to recruit him. Meanwhile, on the other side, late in Season 2, the wealthy second-generation individual protected by Metal Bat had been revealed as the son of the Hero Association's primary financial sponsor. The Monster Association's chaos in the previous season had been orchestrated largely to kidnap this young man, to threaten his father and pressure the Hero Association. And from this point, the central conflict of Season 3 fully emerged. Naturally, the Hero Association could not ignore the sponsor's son. Its upper ranks swiftly began preparations, assembling a group of heroes to rescue him, and, in the process, launch a full-scale extermination of the Monster Association. When the first episode of Season 3 ended, viewers hadn't actually seen much of Saitama in action. Yet surprisingly, there were few complaints. Because one thing was unmistakably clear to every One Punch Man fan. The war between the Monster Association and the Hero Association, foreshadowed throughout the entirety of Season 2, was about to erupt. This would be the largest, most intense arc since the series began. Although the opening episode lacked overwhelming battle scenes, countless questions were already forming in fans' minds. With more than a dozen S-class heroes acting together, could the Monster Association possibly withstand them? What role would Garou ultimately play in this conflict? Carrying these thoughts, anticipation, and excitement, the first episode of One Punch Man Season 3 came to a close. Chapter 168, The Proposal. After the premiere of One Punch Man Season 3, although the episode wasn't packed with dramatic twists and instead focused largely on supporting characters, the audience response was overwhelmingly positive. After last week's frustration with the recap episode, this week's proper premiere felt like a breath of fresh air. Fans were no longer nitpicking every detail, and on the very night of broadcast, Season 3 received a wave of praise. It's still the same familiar feeling, still the same familiar flavor. Long live Teacher Shiro Gain. So Season 3 is Hero Association versus Monster Association. The monsters have formed an organization too? That's kind of terrifying. Of course they would. Monsters aren't mindless. If heroes band together, are monsters really just supposed to wait and be picked off one by one? But who founded the Monster Association? Someone who can command a being like Centipede Elder. Could they actually fight Saitama? Stop dreaming. The only character who ever forced Saitama to throw 2 punches was Boros. Vaccine Man, Rhino, the Giant Brothers, every single one went down in one hit. Don't forget Mosquito Girl. She's shown up across multiple seasons. At first I thought she was a joke character, but if she's tied to Season 3, these monsters might be world-ending threats. You think Centipede looks huge? Official materials say that compared to the younger giant brother, Centipede Elder would barely be big enough to wrap around his waist like a belt. Wait, younger giant brother is that strong? Absolutely. One slap could level a city. Even an S-class hero like Genos would probably get one shot. Honestly, the OP alone showed so many weird silhouettes, they have to be Monster Association members. Damn it, why can't Teacher Shiro Gain release anime as fast as manga? 1 episode a week is torture. That's impossible. Manga can burst release, but anime can't. You'd need 2 teams working simultaneously, and the difference in art style and storyboarding would be painfully obvious. Sigh. I know. I just want the next episode already. Slow work makes fine results. As long as the quality holds, that's enough. Rushing animation is how disasters happen. All night long, One Punch Man fans continued discussing the episode across forums and social platforms. Meanwhile, professionals within Japan's animation industry were closely watching the ratings. Everyone understood that One Punch Man was still the strongest contender for the season's ratings crown, but even champions are judged against their own past. Other series couldn't compete with One Punch Man. But One Punch Man had to compete with itself. Around noon on Saturday, Capital TV station released the official ratings for the first episode of Season 3. 6.59%. A result that perfectly carried over the momentum of Season 2. For REI, however, ratings were no longer something he obsessed over. The Japanese television market has a clear ceiling. Even if Season 3 continued to rise, breaking past 7% would already be near the upper limit. Beyond that, explosive growth was unlikely. Instead, what truly mattered now was the expansion of One Punch Man's merchandise ecosystem. Put bluntly, the anime itself doesn't make real money. Creators don't pursue anime adaptations for the modest licensing fees or Blu-ray sales. The true value lies elsewhere. Anime brings a work directly in front of Japan's largest ACGN audience, driving explosive demand for manga, games, novels, figures, apparel, and countless derivative products. At this point, One Punch Man's viewership growth had reached a saturation point. Pushing ratings higher held diminishing returns. Expanding its global merchandise presence, however, was critical. REI had understood this since Season 1. Back then, his merchandise partners weren't top-tier companies. Production capacity was limited, and some products suffered from quality complaints. But by the time Season 3 premiered, the situation had completely changed. Several major Japanese merchandise manufacturers and distributors now treated One Punch Man as their top priority project of the quarter. Not only were domestic stores fully stocked, but overseas distribution channels were actively expanding as well. Naturally, these companies worked for profit, and REI had made concessions. He wasn't a god. He couldn't personally oversee creation, production, logistics, marketing, and global sales. He wasn't some mythical being with 3 heads and 6 arms. As long as the IP continued to grow, REI didn't mind giving up a portion of short-term profit. He never intended to rely on One Punch Man for the rest of his life. He still carried too many outstanding works from his past life memories. While handling matters related to One Punch Man, the Hunter x Hunter manga continued updating steadily. And then there was REI's new project, Arcane. Scheduled for January next year, still airing on Capital TV station, still 1 episode per week. When REI laid out the plan, Himari frowned. After a moment, she let out a helpless sigh. Teacher Shirogane, you really are a devilish investor. In REI's previous life, Arcane had taken several years just to complete a single season. In Japan's animation industry, as long as funding was sufficient, talent could be gathered rapidly: key animators, directors, production managers, background artists. And if recruitment wasn't enough, you could always poach. Himari understood REI's meaning immediately. This was a project with strict quality standards, a fixed broadcast schedule, and 40-minute episodes. To deliver it on time, Illumination Production would have to expand aggressively, bringing in more top-tier talent and partnering with elite animation companies. If certain segments exceeded their in-house technical limits, those parts would simply be outsourced to stronger studios. If the budget isn't enough, tell me. REI looked straight at her, his tone calm but firm. One Punch Man is expected to bring in several $100 million in global revenue this year. Hunter x Hunter will bring in a similar amount. You don't need to worry about funding. Himari felt her heart skip a beat. Money wasn't omnipotent, but in animation production, she genuinely couldn't think of many problems that couldn't be solved with sufficient capital, especially backed by her own network and her father's connections. After a brief pause, REI continued. Miss Himari, we've worked together for a long time. If you're interested in Arcane, I'm willing to let you invest in the project. He stopped briefly, then added with precision. Your stake will not exceed 4%. You'll only receive dividend rights from the Arcane anime itself. The IP, characters, and all derivative rights remain mine. I also reserve the right to repurchase the stake at a capped price at any time. If you agree, and if you trust me, you're welcome to invest. In most cases, animation studios working for Party A only receive production fees and hold no copyright. Sometimes, studios invest partially. And occasionally, original works are fully funded and produced by the studio itself. But REI didn't need outside investment. This offer was clearly a gesture of trust, and a strategic binding of interests. By tying Himari to the project financially, he ensured her commitment wouldn't just be professional, but absolute. A 4% stake, based on Arcane Season 1's budget, meant several million in upfront investment. For Himari, that was no small sum. She would have to commit nearly all her personal savings, and reinvest a significant portion of the production fees and profits earned from One Punch Man. But considering REI's track record, after deducting costs, this wasn't risk, it was closer to REI handing her millions in future returns. As for Arcane failing, she hadn't even considered that possibility. Some people in the industry were mocking Shirogane for pouring hundreds of millions into an anime that might lose money. Himari trusted neither their judgment, nor her own. She trusted REI's. Could someone this steady, this rational, truly gamble hundreds of millions on a doomed project? And while REI mentioned the repurchase clause, she knew his character well enough. Unless their cooperation collapsed entirely, he would never bother reclaiming such a small stake. All of these thoughts flashed through her mind in seconds. All right, she said, nodding without hesitation. Then, happy cooperation. Rei smiled. I'm currently tied up with multiple projects. For Arcane, I'll personally handle character design, visual direction, storyboards, and part of the music. He met her gaze. For everything else, I'll be relying on you, Miss Himari. Chapter 169, Turmoil. Illumination Production Company moved with astonishing speed. Once Rei and Himari finalized the supplementary agreement, Himari didn't linger at the studio even for a day. She immediately returned to her hometown to pester her semi-retired father, a former top-tier animation producer who had once stood at the peak of Japan's animation industry. On her own, Himari's reputation commanded respect, but not universal deference. Her father, however, was a different story. When he spoke, people listened. Under Himari's relentless persistence, she successfully reached a number of highly capable veterans through her father's old connections, people who had worked with him closely back in the golden age of Japanese animation. These were not newcomers chasing hype, but seasoned professionals who had stepped back from the spotlight only because the industry no longer offered projects worthy of their standards. With that layer of trust, combined with the capital Rei had poured in, Illumination Production Company began releasing bombshell announcements one after another. Animation directors, chief animators, and production managers who had been silent for 2 or 3 years, people widely believed to have retired, suddenly announced their participation in the Arcane animation project. A studio that had been on the brink of bankruptcy just 2 years ago was, starting this April, inexplicably assembling a luxury-grade production team. On top of that, Arcane publicly claimed the highest production budget in the industry for the year. The reaction was immediate. What exactly is Shirogane trying to do? Is he just burning money for fun? People keep saying the budget is $800 million, but looking at this lineup, I honestly doubt that's enough. The confirmed director, Lance, is infamous for extravagant production. His work is high quality because he pours money into every frame. Even non-key frames are polished to absurd levels. And that guy has late-stage obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Work under him for a week and you'll understand. Stop. Don't remind me. I worked under Lance once, on that animation that felt like one endless circus. It was pure hell. Veteran animators drawing day and night, only to have their work rejected again and again. 10 years later, I still get flashbacks. The Arcane team is in for a nightmare. Between now and its premiere next January, they'll learn what real suffering looks like. Suffering? Do you know whose hands that $800 million ends up in? If it were me, I'd fight to get onto that project. But they won't take just anyone. Even secondary and tertiary key animators need 5 to 8 years of experience. And the pay per cut is outrageous. What kind of animation needs this scale? Shirogane is just a manga artist, how is he doing something like this? Manga artist? Don't joke. Anime and manga aren't separate worlds. Shirogane isn't just tearing things up in animation, he's a monster in manga too. Hunter x Hunter is already closing in on 14 million average volume sales. Fastest to 5 million. Fastest to 10 million. At this rate, the fastest to 15 million is only a matter of time. I don't even know where this guy came from. Last year I thought Hikaru no Go was just a good show, my kids liked it, my parents liked it. This year? It feels like he's about to dominate the entire ACT scene. The chain reaction triggered by Arcane rippled across the entire Japanese ACT industry. Seeing the hype reach critical mass, many GG companies rushed forward, hoping to invest or insert product placements. Rei rejected all of them without hesitation. Product placement would only dilute the work. He had no interest in that. While Arcane continued to dominate industry discussions, the second episode of One Punch Man Season 3 aired smoothly. In the Japanese version of the anime, Rei deliberately streamlined Garu's scenes. After Garu was taken to the Monster Association, several high-ranking figures, such as Girogiro, evaluated him. In the original work, these scenes lingered heavily on Garu's psychological growth and ideological struggle. Rei had never been particularly fond of that approach. In his view, Garu's role was important, but not to the extent of overshadowing the larger conflict. If Saitama in One Punch Man is an outright cheat, then Garu is a character built from a script that is inferior to a cheat. His growth is framed as the result of 100 points of blood, sweat, and desperation, yet beneath that lies 10,000 points of raw, unreasonable talent. In battle, he evolves endlessly. Corner him, and he adapts. Push him to the brink of death, and he locks in, breaks through, and comes back stronger. As long as you don't kill him outright, he will immediately surpass you and strike back. This kind of setting was extremely common in Japanese manga in Rei's previous life. It was usually reserved for protagonists. When applied to a villain, however, it becomes deeply uncomfortable to watch. Rei understood this very clearly. So he preserved Garu's core concept, but drastically reduced his screen time. Because what the audience truly wanted to see in One Punch Man was never a villain's slow, indulgent rise. They wanted to see heroes pushed into despair, fighting while outmatched, refusing to retreat even when victory seemed impossible. They wanted to see Saitama appear at the final moment, defeat the enemy with a single punch, let King take the credit, and then walk away casually, leaving behind stunned onlookers and broken logic. They were not especially interested in watching a villain painstakingly grow stronger when that villain was destined to be knocked out by Saitama in one punch anyway. Of course, part of this discomfort also stemmed from the fact that Garu's portrayal in the original work never quite reached a level that truly moved people. At the very least, Rei believed that if the original author, 1, had written a story about King secretly training day and night, earnestly trying to become worthy of his reputation, and if the final arc of One Punch Man had been King formally challenging Saitama, no viewer would have complained that the pacing dragged. Because effort without payoff feels hollow. But irony without resolution feels perfect. After these adjustments, the viewing experience of One Punch Man's third season became noticeably smoother. And more importantly, clearer. By the end of the second episode, the audience had already realized something crucial. The third season was no longer following a single narrative line. It had split into two major threads. One was the open war, the Hero Association versus the Monster Association. The other was Garu, lurking in the shadows of that war, secretly sharpening himself, waiting for the moment to emerge and shock everyone. As more information about the Monster Association was revealed, tension among viewers steadily climbed. Fans hadn't forgotten the Deep Sea King. A demon-level monster at peak condition had once defeated Pori Pori Prisoner and Genos in succession back in Season 1. Since then, the idea that a peak demon-level threat could overpower weaker S-class heroes had been firmly etched into the collective consciousness of One Punch Man fans. And now, even the weakest dragon-level monsters could casually crush Suiryu, the martial arts champion. Considering that Suiryu could easily overwhelm A-class heroes, his strength was likely already brushing the lower boundary of S-class. Yet he had been utterly helpless. The Monster Association possessed multiple dragon-level monsters. And judging by the story's hints, there existed an even more terrifying entity, someone capable of suppressing all of them. A so-called Monster King. Could the Hero Association, with barely more than a dozen S-class heroes, really defeat such an organization? Doubt spread. Anxiety brewed. Then, everything changed. Because viewers noticed one detail on the mission roster. Among the heroes scheduled to launch the direct assault on the Monster Association, was King. The strongest man on Earth. S-class rank 7. King was going to the battlefield too. There was no escaping it now. The weak, helpless, pitiful strongest man on Earth would be thrown directly into the heart of the Monster Association. Would his true nature finally be exposed? Or would he once again, through coincidence, misunderstanding, and sheer cosmic absurdity, further cement his legend as the strongest man alive? Chapter 170, Progress. In the days that followed, the average single-volume sales of Hunter x Hunter officially broke through 14 million copies and continued advancing toward 15 million. At this point, its average sales on Dream Comic were still slightly behind Source War Chronicle. However, in weekly reader votes and popularity rankings, Hunter x Hunter had already surpassed Source War Chronicle by an overwhelming margin. It could only be said that overtaking a work that had accumulated 5 or 6 years of serialization achievements naturally required time. But anyone with a discerning eye could see that this gap would not last long. Throughout April, the first 4 episodes of One Punch Man Season 3 aired in succession. At the same time, the Hunter x Hunter manga intensified the confrontation between Kurapika's team and the Phantom Troop. The two works exhibited completely different temperaments. Hunter x Hunter was heavy, restrained, and somber. After entering the Your New City arc, one memorable character after another emerged, on both the protagonists' and antagonists' sides. Yuvajin, brutal by nature yet absolutely loyal to his comrades. Nobunaga, indifferent to the lives of others but unwaveringly devoted to the troop. Crollo Lucifer, the calm, elegant, and unfathomably dangerous leader. And Hisoka, the traitor hiding his madness behind a grin. In truth, within this arc, Gon himself felt more like a peripheral figure. The most successfully crafted characters were the Phantom Troop members and Kurapika. And market data confirmed this observation. In recent popularity surveys related to Hunter x Hunter, Kurapika and Crollo Lucifer were consistently the two characters who advanced to the final round of Most Charming Character polls. By contrast, One Punch Man thrived not because of a handful of deeply sculpted characters, but because of its sheer density of memes. Its overall tone was light, absurd, and relentlessly humorous. It was the kind of anime that made viewers laugh while watching, and continue laughing long after the episode ended. The memes born from each episode didn't fade away, they accumulated, evolved, and resurfaced repeatedly within the fan community. In the ongoing Monster Association arc alone, aside from King's ever-expanding collection of legendary misunderstandings, discussions surrounding Boros, the power ceiling from Season 1, had once again become active. It was common to see fans endlessly arguing over questions like: could Boros wipe out the Monster Association by himself? Could Boros in his first form defeat Orokai? Would Centipede Elder even survive a single blow? Unless the author explicitly provided an answer, such topics routinely generated thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of replies. And this phenomenon was the unmistakable sign of a work transitioning from mere popularity into a cultural phenomenon. It was exactly like One Piece in Rei's previous life. Each week, fans didn't actually discuss the current chapter. Instead, they endlessly debated power hierarchies, the four emperors versus the admirals, peak Whitebeard versus peak Akainu, arguments that persisted for more than a decade without resolution. Later, when the plot depicted Rox defeating an admiral solo, admiral fans introduced the concept of civilian admirals. When Garp chased down the young four emperors, emperor fans retaliated by inventing apprentice emperors. In a sense, One Punch Man had once achieved global popularity for precisely this reason. Its world-building naturally provoked endless debate. Of course, what made One Piece a legend was its ability to sustain that level of discussion across decades of serialization. And the reason One Punch Man eventually declined in Rei's previous life was equally clear. After the Garou arc, the redraw manga drifted into an increasingly incoherent and directionless storyline. Rei glanced at the heated debate posts flooding the forums and let out a soft sigh. But at least the Monster Association arc and the Garou arc are enough, he murmured, to make One Punch Man globally popular on this plane as well. As for Hunter x Hunter, its growth in average single-volume sales had indeed slowed somewhat. For it to truly claim the position of number one in Japan's manga industry, it still required one decisive catalyst. The anime premiere in July. April passed, and May arrived. Temperatures in the Tokyo region rose rapidly. On campus and in the streets, people's clothing grew lighter and cooler. After Rei personally introduced several senior students from his academy to Illumination Animation Company, placing them into entry-level positions within the One Punch Man and Arcane production teams to gain experience and strengthen their resumes. His reputation within the academy underwent a complete transformation. However, situations where girls with various intentions approached Rei, as they had last semester, had become extremely rare. After all, it was already common knowledge throughout the class and even the academy that Rei was taken. Rumors spread everywhere that he was dating Miyu, the famous beauty from the economics department. And the most convincing part was this: when either of them was asked about it, neither ever denied it. That silence alone was enough to confirm everything in people's minds. "It has to be you," Miyu complained indignantly. "Ever since the rumor about us dating spread across the school, not a single person has dared to confess to me for 3 whole months." That afternoon, Rei and Miyu happened to run into each other in the cafeteria. They ate lunch together, then walked side by side along a quiet campus path. All around them, students whispered, covered their mouths, and pointed with barely concealed excitement. Miyu even deliberately adjusted her angle, as if afraid they wouldn't get a clear photo. "It's the same for me," Rei said with a smile. "A lot of girls who used to randomly add me on chat apps or sit near me during public classes have completely disappeared. They probably realized they couldn't compete with you. Forget about them." Rei waved it off. "By the way, I still haven't officially congratulated you." She looked at him with a grin. "I heard from editor Misaki. Your manga finally got approved for animation. Hojimori Group invested over 50 million, right? And it's scheduled to air in January next year." Miyu's eyes lit up. If I remember correctly, your arcane is also scheduled for January next year, isn't it? What's wrong? Rei asked, amused. Do you think the Touch of Glass anime has any chance of competing with arcane? Why not? She said stubbornly. The entire Japanese animation industry keeps saying you're invincible. That every work you release becomes a hit and never flops. She snorted. But I, Mayu, refuse to believe that. People say things decline after 3 peaks. Your Hikaru no Go, One Punch Man, and Hunter x Hunter just keep getting bigger and bigger. By the time Arcane comes out, maybe it's finally time for you to fall, and become a stepping stone for others. Rei laughed. Let Touch of Glass break into the magazine's top 10 first before you talk like that. That's just waiting for the anime to bring traffic to the manga. Hunter x Hunter hasn't even been animated yet and it's already number 1. Don't make excuses. She suddenly stopped and looked at him. Rei, can't you say something nice for once? My work just got an anime adaptation. Can't you just praise me a little? Rei paused. Then his expression turned serious. Honestly, I really hope your work can surpass Arcane after it airs. Mayu froze slightly. That would mean I get to witness another masterpiece, Rei continued calmly. It's just that. He sighed softly. The possibility is very low. He didn't say 0. Because in his previous life, there had been Demon Slayer. That manga hadn't been particularly popular before its anime. Even after the anime started, its rise was slow, until the production quality completely transformed it. The anime studio elevated everything, emotions, pacing, atmosphere, even fight choreography. The legendary Mugen Train movie, which topped Japan's box office, had entire battle sequences conceptualized and expanded by the animation team. Many of its most moving moments simply didn't exist in the original manga. So Rei never denied the possibility. If Touch of Glass encountered the right production team, it really could explode. Is Arcane really that good? Mayu asked, curious now. You sound incredibly confident. Yes, Rei replied. Very good. Taking everything into account, story, animation quality, production conditions, it should be the best work since my debut. He smiled faintly. You can look forward to it. But don't use Arcane as your benchmark. For Touch of Glass, aim for something realistic. Try to become the second highest rated animated work of the season next January. Mayu narrowed her eyes, then laughed. I've noted your words. If Arcane flops after it airs, she said cheerfully, don't blame me for coming back to mock you. Rei laughed as well. I'll be waiting.
Thanks for listening.